Everybody, we're running a couple minutes behind, as you can figure out, so just bear with us and we'll get started soon. All right, I think we're live. Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the LCUSD Governing Board, June 6th, 2023. And nothing to report out of our closed session. And so we'll get right to it. And I'd like to start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Board Member Thuss, would you lead us, please? Okay, great. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get right at it. We got a big agenda tonight. Lots of different groups here for different reasons tonight. So it's a packed agenda. We're going to get right after our business, which starts off with approval of our minutes from our meeting on April 14th. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Octavia. Oh, you, Caroline, got the second? Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. So approved. And we're going to jump right into our reports. And we'll start off tonight, as usual, with our superintendent report. Wendy.
Thank you. As you said, Mr. President, we have a long agenda this evening, so my superintendent's report will be brief but celebratory. First off, I'm happy to report that we wrapped up the extremely successful 22-23 school year in an appropriate fashion. The sixth grade completion ceremonies at PCY, LCE, and PCR were held on Thursday and Friday, June 1st and 2nd, and each elementary school celebrated and honored its rising seventh graders. And the seventh graders or rising seventh graders were emotional and mostly happy to be completing. But there was a few that were a little teary and tentative, but they were, for the most part, were about to leave the schools where they had spent their entire educational careers to date. So those were really, really special. The completion ceremonies were touching tributes, and I'd like to thank all of the parent volunteers who worked really hard to bring those together, the sixth grade teachers who also contributed so much, and the principals, all who worked together to make them really, really meaningful and special. At 7-8, the Thursday evening promotion, although a bit cold and drizzly, was a stellar ceremony. The honor choir sang, CJSF, ASB, and the web leaders were all recognized. They presented the Scoville Tupper and Principal Awards, and the promotion certificates were conferred. With that, our class of 2027 is ready to enter high school as ninth graders. So congratulations to them. And then the culminating event was on Friday, where we all gathered together to congratulate the class of 2023 and wish them all the best on their future endeavors. We have graduates enrolling in colleges and universities spanning 29 states and 5 countries, some heading off to the military, others to the workforce, and some participating in trade school pursuits, and even a few planning for a gap year. Principal Cardinal shared in his graduation speech that our seniors had earned over $1 million in scholarship funds, and he also commented on the many achievements of this outstanding collection of scholars, performers, athletes, artists, and leaders. So it was very fun. And then finally, we had hoped to have 3 athletes here tonight. We'll try to get them to us for our June 27th meeting. But it was just such a stellar performance by these 3 that we wanted to mention it tonight and hopefully repeat it with them here and certificates on our 6/27 meeting. But Max Sawanovitz earned CIF state championship in placing second for diving this year. So we wanted to just congratulate him. And he also won CIF Southern section. Fellow divers Emmy Machida and Kelsey Brack These ladies, these athletes placed in the diving finals at CIF Southern section. Emmy placed 5th and Chelsea placed 11th. So hopefully their schedules permitting, they'll be with us in 3 weeks, but congratulations to them and wanted to give them a huge shout out as examples of our extraordinary achievements over the course of our athletic programs and all of our other programs in the 2022-23 school year. So that's it for me, Joe.
Thanks, Wendy. Okay, time for my president's report, and it builds on some of the same content that Wendy has. We think a lot alike in terms of what's driving us here. I mean, I just wanted to kind of walk through some of my same observations of this last week, because really it was an amazing last week. As a board member, there is nothing more rewarding about this role than getting so many amazing opportunities to witness and share in the accomplishments and milestones of our incredible La Cañada students. Whether it's what they do on stage, on our athletic fields, in competitions around the state, country, and world, or just day-to-day in the classroom, it's a true joy to see our students realize the tangible benefits of their dedication and hard work. For me, this last week was a crescendo of these opportunities since it was promotion and graduation week, as Wendy mentioned. It was an honor to see up close so many of our students hit these key milestones in their educational and life journey. We had 319 elementary students get promoted from 6th grade to 7th grade, 308 middle schoolers get promoted from 8th grade to 9th grade, and last but not least, 307 12th graders received their high school diplomas. And speaking of our amazing senior class, some of these facts Wendy shared also, it was fun to see where they're headed next year. They're going to have attendance in 29 states, he's mentioned, across 5 countries was exciting. Some amazing schools, public, private, large, small, near and far. From the likes of Cornell and MIT to University College in London and the American University in Paris. Also mentioned was our grads to also plan to attend trade schools, join the military, jump into the workforce, et cetera. But I think we'll all agree, LCHS Spartans are spreading their wings and will be launching full force into making their impact on the world. And finally, I didn't want to just recognize the students who reached these memorable milestones, but also the parents, family, teachers, staff, and community members at large who have helped them along the way as well. They couldn't have done it without our collective LC Village. So this concludes my president's report. Next, we'll move on to our Associate Superintendent of Educational Services report, Ani Eastwind.
Thank you. Today, my report is on the progress of ethnic studies course development at the high school. Ethnic studies is the disciplinary study of race, ethnicity, and other identities, focusing on people's lived experiences and perspectives. The law requires that students in the class of 2030 take 1 semester of ethnic studies, and schools must offer these courses starting in the 25-26 school year. Funds have been allocated by the state to design and implement the ethnic studies course and start teaching it during the 25-26 school year. The districts have been given the choice to decide if it should be a standalone course or to embed the standards in the existing course. For a variety of reasons, administrators have decided not to go with the standalone course option. Administration working with the teachers considered social science and English courses as possible options for ethnic studies implementation and came to a conclusion that an English course would be best. The English department has been working to determine which course they should embed the ethnic study standards in. After several lengthy discussions and analysis, they determined that English 1 course would be most appropriate. Since every 9th grader takes the English 1 course, they will all complete the course and meet the state requirements by the time they graduate. Also, learning about the cultures and the experiences of their peers would allow students to understand and appreciate them throughout their high school journey and will promote a more inclusive learning environment for all students. The teachers have been reviewing literature that would represent the largest subgroups at LCHS. The 4 largest subgroups are African American, Latinx, Asian American, and Armenian American. The teachers have identified some literature pieces representing 2 of these subgroups, which have already been approved by the governing board. They have also utilized community connections and resources to obtain literature representing the other 2 subgroups. Through this course, Students from these subgroups will see themselves and their families' experiences reflected in the curriculum and will learn about the life experiences of others with different backgrounds. The English department's last meeting for this year took place on May 16th, during which they discussed the general objectives for the course, reviewed sample syllabi, reading lists, resources, and started discussing the added components to the pacing guide. 5 teachers in the department will be teaching the English 1 course next year. They will meet during summer to draft the course pacing guide and utilize it to collect feedback from students and families regarding the selected literature. They will continue to refine the course for the next few years and utilize the final version of the course overview and pacing guide in the 25-26 school year. Mr. Cartnell will attend the August 14th board meeting to give an update on the status of the English 1 teacher's summer work and share all pertinent documents that will be provided to all students in the 9th grade English class at the start of the 23-24 school year. Mr. Cartnell will return back at the end of the school year to provide an update on the status of the course, the feedback they collected from students, parents, and staff, and adjustments, if any, that will be made to the course for the 24-25 school year. That concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Anais. We normally have some other reports, including our student rep, but our student rep now is graduated and moved on. So we'll be looking for, I think we'll have news soon on who our who our student rep will be next year. When did we announce that?
Usually in the July meeting.
Okay. We're getting close to deciding. That's my understanding, right? Okay. All right. So then we'll move on to a review of the agenda. And I know there's been some discussion about, at least on consent, pulling out gifts to district. We wanted to highlight some things going on in there. Are there any other items we'd like to shuffle around or pull out of consent? Anything going on that people want to raise and bring to my attention? Okay, so what I'd like to do is to formally pull out gifts to district, which is on number or letter I on the consent. So if we can pull that out, Melissa, you'll cover that. Is that right? And we'll pull that out right before consent. How's that work? Okay, so that'll become item. Well,
L.
consent will move to 13 and this will become 13. Is that how you want to handle it?
No, it'll just be L.
12L. Fair enough. Thank you. All right. So now we're going to move into the opportunity for the public to address the board on non-agendized items. Do we have any in person? Okay, so bear with us as we have a kind of a preamble that we do around public comments, be it for the agendized items or non-agendized items. So bear with me as I read some preamble. Now is the opportunity for the public to address the board on non-agendized items. As you probably know, the board is prohibited by the Brown Act from responding to non-agendized items or discussing your comments beyond a brief clarification or question or request to agendize an issue for a future meeting. Our meeting is in person tonight, so the public provisions of AB 361 do not apply. However, to facilitate our goal of community involvement and input, we have 2 methods of public comment. First, the traditional method of appearing in person, adding your name to the list, and delivering your comments at the appropriate time in our agenda. The second is to submit written comments electronically via our district's webpage. Comments submitted electronically will be read, reviewed, and considered by the board, but as noted on the agenda, online public comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. The comments submitted electronically are visible to all members of the public via our district's agenda webpage. But we do have 2 asks. First, as a school district, we highly value the privacy and safety of our students, so we ask you not to identify students or name them. And second, we ask to please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less so we can allow other community members to speak. We hope that our public comments model for our students civil discourse, respectful inquiry, engaged listening, and open consideration of multiple perspectives. And during our non-agendized item, like I mentioned, board is not allowed to respond or engage. But when it comes to agendized items, we are allowed to discuss the issue, and we hope to continue the tradition of respectful dialogue so often found at our board meetings. And we ask our audience and speakers to treat one another with dignity, compassion, and respect. With that in mind, Do we have cards for the non-agendized?
Yes, we have 2 in-person public comments and 1 online that was received.
So while you're bringing the cards over, ask the board to look online to the non-agendized comment. Board members had the opportunity to read the online comment?
Mr. President, I think that actually may be appropriate to discuss a little bit with one of our later agenda items. We can talk about the field. That way we can actually give a response to it. So maybe we can just kind of defer that and discuss it as part of our conversation later about.
Yeah, I'm fine. I was thinking the same thing, Dan. So can you recode that, Nairi, as a agendized item? And that would be agendized with the RFP item, right?
I think so. Then we can talk about how often the field's replaced and what the process is and maybe answer that question.
And that item is 12D. So we'll come back around on that, okay? Even though we've already read it, just let's categorize it correctly for the agenda webpage.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts? Good. Okay, so moving to the in-person, I'd like to bring up Nelson Ariza Silva. Do I have that right? Nelson, come on up. Step up to the mic and your 3 minutes when you're ready to start.
Good evening. My name is Nelson Ariasa Silva, and I would say that I'm honored. This is my first time in this particular type of meeting. As a resident of La Cañada, I would like to give the, I'm going to be brief, that every single one of us living in this particular neighborhood, we are so lucky to have the dynamics that involve education and sports. My son was fortunate enough to be involved in physical activities with her son and with dance also, baseball. But what I wanted to tell you is my son graduated last year. And then he participated in soccer through his junior varsity and the varsity team with Bruno. So last year he was recruited by Oregon State University on a full scholarship. And then in addition to that, he is pursuing the medical field. He wants to be a forensic psychiatrist. I work in the medical field as well. I don't think so that's going to be a big deal for me to try to make an appointment with him, when the time comes. But what I wanted to say is that once again, we are so fortunate to live in this neighborhood because it is amazing the dynamics that every single one of the participants, like gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I want to thank you on behalf of my son, Michelangelo Arriaza. So thank you so much for all the involvement that you guys are able to provide to our community. Thank you.
Please pass along our congratulations to Michelangelo. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker, Minjung Kanovako, come on up.
Good evening, respected school board members and LCUSD administration cabinet members. My name is Ms. Mijang Konakov, and then I have 2 children attending LCHS now. I appreciate this opportunity to address my concerns before you today. In October 2021, the California government approved a new requirement for the high school graduation, including the ethnic studies. The California State Board of Education adopted the ethnic studies model curriculum in March 2021, which serves as a guide for school district to tailor their courses to reflect the students' demographics within their communities. During the LCUSD DEI committee webinar on May 2nd, a plan for implementing 7 through 12 ethnic studies in the next school year was shared. For me, it is disheartening to note that this plan does not include the Korean American ethnic studies, despite the Korean Americans constituting the largest heritage group among LCHS students. As a parent within the LCUSD, it is important to me that my children have the opportunity to learn about the migrants' stories of their ancestors. As an educator, my aspiration is for all students to develop a comprehensive understanding of the achievements and and contributions made by ethnic minority groups in America, enabling them to appreciate the value these communities bring to our society. As the president of the Korean American Parents Association, I am dedicated to ensuring that our neighbors and then their children are knowledgeable about the struggles and contribution of Korean Americans in this country. Southern California is home to a significant population of Korean Americans, and then there are preserved historical monuments and sites in LA that serves as educational resources. I recently learned that the Anaheim High School District will offer Korean American ethnic studies through the Cambridge Virtual Academy for the entire school district. And Cypress High School will introduce Korean American ethnic studies as a standalone elective starting in 2024. As a dedicated stakeholder in the LCUSD educational system, I kindly request that the school board ensures ethnic studies at LCHS aligns with the diverse students demographics in the LCF community. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and I trust that you will take it into consideration as you continue to enhance the educational experience for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Minjung. Thanks. So noted. And if you have any of those assets that you mentioned in terms of other districts, if you can pass them along to myself or Anais in terms of some of that, we can take a closer look. Thanks. Okay, do we have anything else, Nairi? Any other online non-agendized? Okay, then we're ready to move on. And we're moving into the public hearing section. And there's 2 public hearings today. Unlike usually we just have one, but the first is I'm gonna open up the public hearing around our 2023-2024 local control and accountability plan. That'll be an agenda item a little bit later, but we have the separate item right now also as the public hearing. So I'm gonna open it. Anybody that would like to step to the mic and talk about it? Nothing online?
We have no online public
Okay,
comments.
the board members, anything? Okay, then I'm gonna close the public hearing on the LCAP. We'll see a little bit more about that later. Next, our public hearing is about the report of estimated revenue and expenditures and the review of the district's proposed budget. Public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience? Board members? Anything online?
No public comments.
Okay. So this is largely procedural, but we're going to close that and we're going to have an item a little bit later diving into the budgets and et cetera. So close that. Okay, so then that moves us to our next section on the agenda, first read items. With that, we'll go to 12A, Citizens Oversight Committee and our annual report to the governing board. And am I turning it over to Mike right away, or Wendy, did you want to tee it off?
Actually, Melissa will tee it up for us, and I want
Great.
to thank Dr. Leininger for being here tonight.
Okay, good evening. So as you know, every year we bring a member of our Citizens Oversight Board to the board meeting to report about what we did during the year and report out in alliance with our disclosures that we're required to do. So tonight, Dr. Mike Leininger is here to present out on what we did over the last year.
I think she just turned it back on. Thank you, Melissa. On behalf of the entire committee, I would like to thank Melissa and all the staff for the wonderful job that they do. We meet 4 times a year. They answer every question we have. They make adjustments to our reports to make them more user-friendly for the public. And it's just a pleasure to work with them on this committee. As set forth in Prop 39, the purpose of the committee is to review the expenditures of funds received from the bond issuance to ensure that the funds are spent only as authorized. It is not to comment on which projects are going to be done and the order they're going to be done or to the degree that they're going to be done. So with that, we meet 4 times a year, and I am very happy. And I'll jump right to the bottom because you do have a packed agenda. I am pleased to inform you that the district is in compliance with Article 13A, Section 1B3 of the California Constitution, the performance and compliance audits conducted by the firm of Edie Bailey for the 21-22 school year found that the district expended building fund measure LCF funds only for the specific projects approved by the voters. The committee found that the current projects underway for the 22-23 year are authorized under measure LCF. And again, we have provided you with all the documentation for follow-up and open for questions.
Board, anybody?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, which is that I'm the board representative on this committee, and I've just been so impressed with this committee for years and years, that the dedicated work, spending time going through every project and looking through, making sure all the expenditures. I wanted to specifically note Gretchen's work with the committee. There were times where there were questions or clarifications needed on line items and the way that things were written up. And in subsequent meetings, Gretchen came back with just, wonderful additions and changes to the spreadsheets. And so it's been a really great experience to be the representative on that committee. And Mike, thank you for all your hard work and leading that committee for many years now.
Other comments?
Well, and I will just add that I thought I was done, but Melissa informed me I have one more year. And then I do term out.
Well, thank you for your service. The 10 members, all of you, thank you on our behalf of the board. There is an attached update. There's actually a PowerPoint slide running through some of the projects. If you're so interested to kind of take your own deep dive, you can go back online and take a look, or those online at home. Because you're not walking through that slideshow, is my understanding, right?
Correct. Those were the presentation that was made at our last COC meeting, and those are all available online as we go throughout the year every quarter as well.
That's great. Okay. Any online comments?
We do not have any public
Nothing
comments.
else? Well, then on behalf of the board, we accept your report. Thank you very much for your service, and we'll see you over the next year, Mike. Thanks.
Do we need to have a vote on it, right?
Do we need to vote to accept that?
I would move to accept the report.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to 12B. This is our DEI annual report to the governing board. And then we have two back-to-back items related to this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wendy, who will help set up the committee to come in and share out their findings for the year.
Thank you. So just like the Bond Oversight Committee, the COC, we have a DEI Oversight Committee, and the bylaws of the DEI OC require that it issue a report of its activities at least once a year, and then to report annually to the governing board in June of each year. This report is designed to update the governing board regarding the year's progress related to the DEI 3-year implementation plan, the district's adherence to the plan, and LCUSD community feedback on the plan. The LCUSD DEI OC's annual report has been prepared tonight, and it will be presented by staff, followed by our co-chair, Mr. Sugi Sorensen, who is present tonight, and he will report in terms of the district's adherence to the plan, give any insights he would like to offer, and then also be able to respond to governing board questions. So we'll begin with the staff report, which is a short PowerPoint presentation, and that will be presented by me and Anna Iswen and Deborah Craddock. Thanks. So thank you. The DEI OC 3-year plan has been shared throughout the year with the community. Dr. Craddock has provided email updates to the entire community periodically throughout the school year. This evening's presentation serves as part of the year-end annual report. And in terms of the district and school leadership component of the plan, I'll present just a couple of slides on our progress to that end. The DEI glossary of terms has been reviewed and really dissected 4 times by the DEI Oversight Committee. A final version was developed and presented to them on May 11th, 2023. And the DEIOC voted to recommend the glossary of terms to the LCUSD Governing Board. And you'll see that as the next agenda item. And just as a point of clarification, that glossary of terms will be used as a resource. It'll be posted on the district website. It'll be distributed to parents in their annual notifications at the beginning of the school year. And it will be contained as a resource in the teacher welcome back packets for teacher use as appropriate. For the next slide, the DEI 3-year plan continues its forward progress. So we've completed year 2 of the 3-year plan. Some components that we've made progress on is we've identified and worked with 4 DEI subject matter experts. These have been Dr. Jennifer Lindholm, Dr. Brandy Shufatinsky, Mr. Timothy Ojatunde, and Dr. Kikanzi Gnuri Roberts. These 4 experts have been vetted by the DEIOC, and they have worked with the district throughout this school year to varying extents and have been identified as people who will work with us going forward into next school year for the year 3 of our plan. Our principals have reviewed and updated their citizenship standards according to plan direction. The citizenship standards include now DEI metrics, and that helps teachers align with when scoring their citizenship grades to some DEI standards. But just so that people are comfortable, for example, one item on the citizenship rubric is simply for a teacher to evaluate that students in a class consistently contribute to a welcoming and inclusive learning environment. So it's standards for review that the teachers look at when assigning a citizenship grade. We continue to review and monitor school site demographics as a data point. And then we are conducting every year since the plan began annual exit interviews. These are for non-matriculation grade levels. So we wouldn't do it for 6th because we do have some 6th graders who matriculate into junior high and matriculate out of our system. We do have 8th graders who matriculate out of our system before going to high school for various reasons like single gender education or religious education. And then we obviously, our seniors matriculate out to go on their exciting and new adventures. But our school site principals issue these surveys, and we really try to drill down with families as to why a family might elect to leave the district, in a grade level that isn't perhaps a typical grade level by which one would determine to leave the district. And some of the reasons also include families, in case they'd like to share with us if any of these reasons have to deal with DEI issues. These are issued by the principal or by the site secretaries, and the results are asked to be contributed or returned around to the district for analysis by July 31st of each year. And my last slide, let's see, we also this year, just to give you sort of a framework for how we continue the work for diversity, equity, inclusion, every leadership team member in the district develops annual goals. At least one goal has a DEI component. Administrators meet twice per month as teams or on a monthly basis with their direct report to monitor progress on all of their goals. And then we're entering evaluation season. All executive members of the administrative team conduct evaluations on the direct reports, and those intensive evaluations take place annually each summer. Our DEIOC committee has done excellent work. I'd like to thank all of them for their participation and leadership. That committee met 4 times this year. Our final meeting was on May 11th, 2023. And the Oversight Committee monitors, as we've said, the district's progress on its implementation, action services, all the metrics and targets available to demonstrate progress on the DEI 3-year plan. And then finally, with the DEI Oversight Committee is charged with this annual presentation to the governing board. And it's really focused, like our other oversight committees, on demonstrating progress, making sure that the plan has stakeholder feedback and any recommended adjustments are made annually, and that the committee members can attest to the district's adherence to the plan as adopted by the board. And
Thank you so much. In the Human Resources Policies and Practices section, there's 3 subcategories that is part of our implementation plan. Recruitment, interviewing practices, as well as mentoring and support for our staff. Our first section is our recruitment section. And so our recruitment and our outreach efforts are reviewed every year, not only at the end of each year, but throughout the year and season as we go. And then we will adjust based on the openings or vacancies that we have currently and then projected vacancies. And to follow along with that, we then attend job fairs. And so some of those will be in person and some of those will be virtual. And so since the pandemic, that is one area that has been expanded for all human resource staff is the virtual job fairs. And it really has opened our doors up to candidates that we may not have seen otherwise. And so that's been really exciting to bring some new folks down into the Southern California and La Cañada specifically. So that's been a real treasure. And then our equity audit for our human resources section, we have been looking at this all year with the oversight committee and have settled on a framework that was developed in conjunction and guidance with Dr. Jennifer Lindholm and the district staff. And so that work will settle into 4 different areas and be initiated in the fall this coming year. Don't know what I did. There we go. In the interviewing practices section, we've done some really great work with Dr. Brandy Shufatinsky. She has helped us develop a rubric that we can use across multiple job classifications as we analyze our candidate pools. And so as you can see here, the rubric establishes categories of expert, advanced, intermediate, basic, and then an awareness level. And so it really helps us maintain an objectivity as we evaluate candidates as they come through our interview sessions, and then we can then make the best choices for our district vacancies based around some of that information. We also have unconscious bias training that we have done with our interview panels in the last 2 years, and so this is something that we are really committed to doing as a part of our ongoing practice, and so the panel members have different areas that they look at in terms of where they might have their own unconscious bias and then how to mediate for that bias as they're going through interviews with prospective candidates for our vacancies. And then our third section in the human resources and policies and practices section is under mentoring and support. And so I find this to be some of the most exciting and rewarding work in terms of HR. And so the first bullet there is relative to our everyday heroes. And so this idea came from the DEI oversight and superintendent's committee originally to recognize those staff members that are doing excellent work every single day in our schools and across our district. And so we have been able to highlight both a certificated and a classified member, at least one in each one of those categories every month at our governing board meetings. And so not only do we get to honor them here in front of the public, but we also present them an award and bouquet of flowers or a plant at their school sites in front of their colleagues. And so it's become really a special moment each month as we're able to identify those really terrific individual everyday heroes that are doing great work in the area of DEI and beyond. The second piece there is a formal mentoring program, which we initiated this fall. And so at both the district and site levels, we have formalized topics that mentors that are paired up with our new staff members discuss with our new staff members to make sure that all of our new employees have a good sense of what our culture is like, as well as expectations that are going to be clear. And then they have a go-to person that they can reach out to anytime throughout the year. If they have questions, concerns, anything that might come up, it really is intended to be someone that they can build that trusting relationship with, that they see as one of their closest colleagues. And so we've heard really great feedback from our new staff members in both the certificated and classified units. Our certificated excuse me, I didn't clarify, is our teachers, our psychologists, counselors, and then our classified staff are those support staff that would work with our students as well. So they might be aides, they might be security staff at the school site, custodians. And so no matter what your job classification is, we pair them up with someone that they can see as a mentor and a support throughout their time with us in La Cañada. And then lastly, we have professional development offerings that we were able to provide staff in the month of May as we head into summer season. Many of our staff members take advantage of having that downtime to then expand their own professional growth. And so in consultation with Dr. Jennifer Lindholm, as well as Anais and myself, we really kind of scoured not only locally, but across the nation where we can find some great offerings for our staff that align with our DEI work, as well as some of the other topics that we've spent some time on as a district. And so we were able to provide that for them this past month, as well as information on how they can apply for salary advancement if they have, if they're in the certificated category. So it was a really great year in terms of human resources and policies and practices. And I look forward to another year in year 3. And I'm going to hand it over to Anais.
Oh, thank you. For the third section of our plan is professional development and parent education. So these were divided into 3 components: the professional development that was provided to administration, to our governing board, and to our teaching staff. And finally, parent night for DEI related topics. So Jennifer Lindholm was outstanding for all 3 purposes. She did the administrative training, the governing board presentation, the staff trainings, and our parent night. So the administrative retreat training was on March 22nd, along with our governing board, and she presented on restorative practices and culturally responsive and sustainable education. She presented to our leadership team at our annual retreat on connecting DEI with LCUSD environmental context and educational commitments. Our site administration also joined their teachers when she did the training for the teachers in early March. Every school participated in that DEI training provided by her, and that training focused on strengthening and sustaining empowering learning communities. She provided guidance on how to address issues involving discrimination, racism, and bias, and how to facilitate critical thinking and respectful discussions around contentious topics. Staff has also been provided with tools, mentoring, and strategies throughout the school year to differentiate instruction. This has happened at staff meetings, professional development sessions, as well as through teacher evaluation process. Our community enjoyed a very informational parent night as part of our family learning series on November 29, focusing on DEI, specifically providing resources to parents on raising good citizens and leaders in a globalized society. Dr. Lindholm has attended most of our DEI oversight committee meetings this year and provided valuable information and responded to questions and concerns raised by the parents who are serving on that committee. My colleagues are not here this evening, so I will also be sharing information under their components. This particular one is on student services and climate of care. So we did some things under elementary schools as I worked closely with our principals, as well as at the 7-8 level with Dr. Gold and the high school level with Jim, Adam, and Jennifer. So at elementary schools, we had led student council meetings, activities, assemblies that promoted belonging, connectedness, and inclusivity in our schools. Some schools held school-wide games to improve student and staff relationships. Students had opportunities to interact with other staff members that are not usually their teachers, as well as the students who interacted with other students from other classrooms and other teachers. They also benefited from class buddies, students and teachers at different grade levels getting to know each other. This also supports belongingness and inclusivity and everybody getting to know each other and caring for one another. Weekly community circles through our LCL lessons promoted classroom community and proactively deal with issues and concerns in class and on the playground as they happen. And our counselors led lessons in the classrooms, again, to support inclusivity and school belongingness. In terms of our secondary schools, this year, we have been working with an initiative called LCF Alliance for Youth. This started a movement at the middle school. Thank you, Wendy. With the student committee that is implementing different activities and different thematic activities at the 7-12 level to encourage the implementation of this initiative. And as part of this, for the first time, they implemented a multicultural fair on May 12th, which was a huge success for a first time, mainly student-led and with the support of the PTSA. They did an outstanding job. We were very impressed. And conducted yearly, we have student perception and climate surveys in order to determine whether all students, and specifically our key subgroups, are experiencing success and belongingness in our schools. We are continuing to empower and encourage students to promote DEI initiatives through academics, athletics, and and extracurricular activities. We continue to use Positive Coaching Alliance to promote positive culture amongst our coaches and student athletes. We also have provided DEI-related informational sessions to our LCUSD families through our Family Learning Series, which I mentioned earlier under my section. And finally, every year, under one of our APs in charge of discipline, we analyze our school discipline data and determine whether all students, again, especially our key subgroups, are experiencing consistently implemented restorative outcomes through our discipline implementation. We continue also to empower teachers with strategies to promote inclusive and supportive learning environments rooted in restorative practices and the climate of care through focused professional development. Continuing the positive behavioral interventions and supports, we call it PBIS, as well as kindness campaign to promote climate of care throughout campus. And on May 16, one of our DEI experts, Timothy Ojetunde, met with various groups of students at LCHS to facilitate a discussion around DEI-related topics. More opportunities will be provided to our students to meet with Tim and later to design a plan to address some of the student needs and concerns that were brought up during these sessions. Under curriculum and instruction, at the elementary sites, we successfully completed the K-6 social science textbook adoption process and will be having the new textbooks at the start of next school year. We continue to implement correlate rubric when considering new materials to make sure they are following all the guidelines set in place by our committees and implementing restorative teaching plans at all elementary schools. For our 7th and 8th grade social science teachers also completed the textbook adoption process and will use their new textbooks next year. The executive director of special education reviewed our special education referrals and reclassification process. Again, this year, this happens every year to make sure that we are fairly and equitably implementing all the protocols and procedures that are in place. The English department is developing the LCHS Ethnic Studies class to be taught next academic school year. I gave more specific details in my report today. And we continue to have PCC's Ethnic Studies class offered at our school. This will continue again next year. Again, at 712, we are continuing to evaluate curricular materials in ELA, humanities, and science using the DEI rubric. So secondary has their own rubric and elementary developed their own rubric. And we consistently use that anytime new material is being brought to my attention, which then I bring it to board for their approval. We also have responsive teaching plans at the middle school and high school levels, which you will hear more about at the beginning of the school year to find out the results of those plans. We analyzed student performance and assessment data regarding our new AP government class, which changed its format to more of a PBL aligned course instead of the typical AP class. So we will look at the AP scores this year and see if there's any change based on this new type of format that we implemented last year, and make adjustments accordingly.
I'm sorry, can you, PBL, what is that acronym?
Project-based
Oh,
learning.
project-based.
Mhm.
learning. Okay, great.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then conducting yearly student perception surveys in order to determine whether LCUSD is providing rigorous and robust learning experiences to all students, especially our key subgroups. And that was the last of our progress towards year 2 implementation.
And so now I'd like to invite our co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Oversight Committee, Mr. Sugi Sorensen, and extend to Sugi our heartfelt thanks. He keeps meetings rolling on track. He always does his homework. We have good and thorough agenda planning sessions, and we're greatly indebted to him for just his expert leadership in making sure that we're accountable, making progress, and adhering to the plan. And he'll attest to that, offer you some insights, and then take questions from the board.
Thank you. So as co-chair of the LCUSD DEI Oversight Committee, I wanted to follow up with Cabinet's specific report, and we have certain responsibilities that are in the bylaws. The other co-chair is Hugo Zeck. He wanted to be here. He had a family issue come up. He wanted to extend his apology that he couldn't be here. And he also wanted me to say that he is available to answer any questions you might have after the meeting. Just reach out to him. Okay, so just a little background on the Oversight Committee. It consists of 23 members. We have 8 parents, 4 certificated and classified staff members, 2 non-voting student members. We also have 5 non-voting district and site administrators, and of course, 2 of you who attend our meetings as well, but are non-voting. So it's quite a diverse group. I think we achieved quite a bit this year. We're scheduled, or our bylaws require that we meet 3 times. We had 4 meetings over the year, starting in October of 2022. We are charged as an advisory committee to you to listen and listen and review reports from district staff, to listen to reports from the consultants that Wendy mentioned that we have, as well as there's been some student reports. We are also a conduit to the community. So we have received many comments from community members, parents, teachers, administrators. And I think we've done a good job this year adding those items onto our agenda, and we've addressed several issues that have come up. So our job, to remind you of the bylaws, is to verify that the district is adhering to the DEI implementation plan and to recommend any plan adjustments. So speaking on behalf of the Oversight Committee, we believe that the 3-year DEI implementation plan is on track, that it's achieved almost all of the year 2 goals. I'll speak to the specific ones where developments have come up, but we think that everything's on track. Just as a little background, there were numerous revisions to the year 2 plan that you guys originally adopted, I believe, in October of 2021. And those year 2 revisions were brought to our committee in our October 2022 meeting. I believe you were also presented with those revisions at your October 25th meeting. I don't remember if you formally adopted or approved them. I know you were presented with them. It may have just been an informational item. So as of now, but not in hopefully about 10 minutes, there are 2 items that were in year 2 that I would say are major items that didn't get done this year. One of them did, and you'll vote on it in a few minutes. So Those two are the DEI glossary of terms. And the other one is the HR equity audit. I know Deborah spoke to that. So I just wanted to give you a little background on the history of those items and why we're where we are now. My understanding. So in the original 3-year DEI implementation plan, the hope was to have the glossary of terms done in year 1, but we noticed that there was quite a robust viewpoint, diversity of viewpoint on certain issues. So it's taken a long time. I mean, I look back on our meetings this year, we had hoped to finish it up at our October meeting, and we wound up discussing it for all 4 meetings. But I'm glad to say that at our May 11th meeting, we did finally reach resolution on the 4 last remaining terms. In fact, I think we couldn't reach agreement on one, so we agreed to leave it out for now. You'll be presented with that and get more information on the next agenda item. With regard to the equity audit, the committee still had some unanswered questions at the May 11th meeting. And we gave questions and direction to staff. And so that item is being moved out to year 3. As Deborah said, we do have a framework that Jennifer Lindholm had presented, but we had questions about that as well. So we as a committee think it's something that we need to be careful and deliberate about in moving forward. So we don't see any risk to not achieving that in year 2. So that's my report. Overall, I think the committee worked very well together. I did want to extend a special thanks to several of our members who are terming out. The bylaws state that terms of service are 2 years for the parent members. And then we solicited, I believe in our February meeting, for those parent members who wanted to continue to year 3. So we have some continuity. So I just wanted to give particular thanks to those members whose service is done. So that would be parents Ahi Han, Kevin Martin, Hugo Zek, Charlotte Wells, staff members Kim Crosby and Justin Ike, and our 2 student representatives this year, Jessica M. and Stephen M. So I believe the replacements for those of us that I'm terming out as well. The replacements, I think we got at least 18 nominee or parents who volunteered to be considered for selection to replace those members that are terming out. And that decision, I believe, will be made by end of this week. Is that correct? So that ends my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, board. I know Caroline, you and I were part of it, so we're pretty much up to speed. And maybe one comment before we jump into other comments, but because we've been 1 of 2 members, I've been very pleased how the committees work together. You'd never know in certain situations. This has been a touchy subject with misperceptions and feelings and emotions. And I'm just really pleased how the committee came together, the not cross-functional, but cross-sectional part of the community came together under Hugo's leadership and Sugi's leadership, but respectful and thoughtful discussion, very iterative at times, which sometimes took us, beyond our original deadlines, but we ended in a really good spot. And I think we really kept our eye on the kids and the students and helping, the main mission, which was to prepare them for a global diverse world. So in these discussions, were fascinating and respectful. And I grew as being part of the committee in terms of just hearing the different perspectives and the insights and things like that. But with that, questions from the board or anything of Sugi?
I have a couple questions, but I'm not sure if they're Sugi, if they're questions for you or maybe for Deb. On the HR in particular, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about the equity audit, but I'm wondering, are there any metrics? Have any metrics been in terms of diversity of candidates, in terms of attendance of our parent education nights? Are those the kinds of things? Are we tracking that information, or is that something we think we're going to track in the equity audit?
Yeah, thank you for that. We are working with Dr. Lindholm to kind of figure out what exactly the metrics are that we're going to look at moving forward as we do some review of policies and practices in the HR world. We do have some data metrics. We looked at our staff demographics this year, as well as our student demographics. As a point of information. And we also have some exit interviews that we do with employees as they depart, working for our district. Other than that, we don't have anything that's formalized at this point because we're still kind of evolving in terms of what that equity audit will look at it as an in-depth study. But we're certainly open to thinking through it with the committee because we want to be really intentional about what information we're looking at and why before we start jumping into something like that. Because as you can imagine, there's so many data points that we want to be really strategic in the ones that we're looking at to get the results that we're specifically interested in.
Great. If I could just, I mean, I know this is a process, but if I could just throw in a request for diversity, some sort of diversity numbers on candidates in terms of our pool, just because I think that's, you know, we've identified that as something that we're working towards. I'd love to see if we're making growth in that area. The other thing, and maybe this is Sugi, this is a question for you or for everybody, is just understanding we're in year 2 of 3 years, and I'm a little unclear from this report and just from the conversation what happens this time next year. Like, are we just dropping off a cliff, or how are we gonna move forward after that?
Well, the intended goal, and we're happy to take feedback from both the governing board and the oversight committee. The intended goal was to have the kickoff of the DEI initiative sort of at the district and, you know, sort of at the committee level, and it's a board committee, so it has the bylaws and the rules. Our goal would be then to have the work embedded at the sites and have it really driven by the site principals with actions and services, metrics and targets, all related to goals that we can still assess and report on annually. But it really shouldn't be, in our view, if we're talking about student inclusion, health, wellness, belongingness, safety, security, all of those issues that go into, you know, students feeling represented by their campus, belonging in their campus, that there's fair treatment, that all of that should be site-based. And so we're really working, I mean, the culmination of all of the staff and admin PD has largely been to affect a seamless transfer to that transition at the end of year 3. If we find at the end of year 3 that we're not ready for that, we'll adjust. But the goal is to transition the responsibility for the work. Obviously, the district is involved and cares deeply, but we really feel like the impetus for leadership should rest at the sites.
And I think I have a slightly different spin on it. I think that's an accurate characterization of our objectives, but I think at some point this just should become the way we work, right? It should be integrated, it's not really a handoff. It's, to me, it's that we've done our work to make it how we operate, how we work, the culture drivers, all those components. So and it maybe in year 3, we do have to have, are we ready for that? Maybe there's a health check at the very end. Because I don't think we envisioned in perpetuity oversight committee around DEI. If we stand up the DEI plan and execute it like we want, then it should just naturally retire itself because it's become the way we operate. And then that's part of the handoff you expect. So I get that part too, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. It just starts to become the way we operate.
You know, it's funny because I have felt, I felt from day one that a successful program meant that we wouldn't be talking about it as a program anymore. We would be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as who we are, as core to what we do. But I do wonder, and I would love to know other people's thoughts, is when we do that, to make sure we don't lose sight of it, if we're moving it, is there value in continuing some sort of oversight committee? Not so much in the way that they're formulating. I mean, the oversight committee isn't formulating plans now, but you're definitely working through each step. But I guess just to sort of keep us on track moving forward. I don't know I know our plan is that these terms are, everybody's they're terming out after 2 years. We have some people staying 3. I'm assuming these people who are coming on would be doing a 1-year term. I just think as part of next year, the part of the plan should be to discuss what are we doing after that? And, because it's certainly not it's not in this.
And I think we have a good model in our safety and security plan. We had safety and security issues. It was a large scale community concern. The board dealt with it with staff at several board meetings, determined that we needed a safety and security committee, wanted to make sure that that committee was transparent and public. So it became a board committee. That committee lasted for 2 years, where the initiatives and the initial actions and services and goals were all identified, with board members leading, each component, each goal area. And then it transitioned into just the work that we do. And it became part of the bond. It became part of our curriculum. It became part of our professional development. And in those reports, in the various components of how we do business and how we run our organization, the board gets frequent updates all about safety and security, but not sort of as a standalone committee with a standalone plan. It's really infused into the work that we do.
But Josh brings up a good point. How do we measure certain components that as lagging indicators of the work that's embedded, right? And so maybe there's a way in an LCAP or as a board strategic pillar or priority that maybe it's not called DI, but it's about preparing students for success outside. And inside of that are some of these residual measures that you've been talking about. And I think it's worth a conversation about how to keep it going.
Some of that's already being done. Like I know that there were specific DEI questions added to the Panorama Ed surveys, and presumably to gather longitudinal data, you'll keep those questions in. So those will be metrics you'll be able to use in future years, whether or not the oversight committee exists.
And I think for some of the structural components of our organization, like the LCAP, you have an annual report. So if you build in DEI, components to the LCAP under the 4 priorities of the district: recruitment and retention, world-class educational program, facilities, which could relate to safety and security, and then climate of care and belongingness with regard to student organizations and all of that. I think that it would be a natural way to embed it so that it has plan components and accountability, but it then becomes part of the local control and accountability plan versus a separate plan.
We have some public comments to get to. Any other board comments?
Real quick, I wanted to give kudos to Karen and Anais for working so hard for Family Learning Series on this, to keep the parents informed also, not just our staff and not just our kids, but bringing our parents along with us.
And I also want to just echo the thank you to all the committee members and to Mr. Sorensen. I think the work you're doing and have been doing is very important work, but also very challenging work. As Joe alluded to, I think it's challenging work, but extremely important. And your committee has done it in a very considerate and deliberate and balanced and thorough way. And I think we all very much appreciate the work you and the committee have done. So thank you all.
Okay, I think Nairi, there was someone else. I'm sorry, did I hear? Okay, an online comment that still just one, right?
Correct.
Okay, did everybody at the board have a chance to take a look at that? Okay, well then I know the Pastor Sears, Reverend Kyle Sears, sorry. Come on up. And thank you for all you do in the community too, bringing awareness on with what you're doing through your church on some of these important issues for our community. So that doesn't go unnoticed, believe me.
Well, thank you. And that's what I wanted to speak to, is how I'm seeing some effects and consequences of the work that has been done in the DEI initiatives and the work that the Oversight Committee has done. And so I want to say thank you on behalf of my students who are LCHS students. They have received a lot of benefit from it. And so I've been able to be involved with the Alliance for Youth meetings and engaging with that. And again, it's quite remarkable that it's not only LCHS that is engaging in this work, but we've invited all of the schools that are in La Cañada to participate, as well as businesses and churches and other stakeholders. And again, it is a community-wide effort that is noticed. I see the posters around town, and that kind of community cohesiveness is important, especially when you see the online rhetoric that surrounds a lot of these issues. I think it's important that we mark ourselves as a community that can be respectful. And so I appreciate that. My high school students have flourished with some of the diverse readings that they've been offered in their history and their English classes. That often leads to conversations that they tell me about or that are happening in class that are fruitful, that they wish would keep going on, which is exciting to hear. And it also causes them to engage more in the conversations we're having at home around the dinner table about issues that are affecting our society, our nation, our hopes for the future for them. And so again, they are being equipped to have these hard conversations in respectful ways that make them excited to come home and talk to mom and dad about them. So I appreciate that. I do hope that in light of that, as we move forward and then begin to also evaluate the ethnic studies curriculum through these lenses, that we are able to keep this challenging and diverse reading material and thoughts that are being able to expand our kids' perspectives. My youngest son will be the first of the class to engage in this work, and so I'm excited that it seems like we're on the right track. And so I just want to say kudos for all the work done. I know that it's often a thankless task where a lot of it is overlooked or unseen. And so I just wanted to let you guys know it is seen and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Any other comments? Please, Octavia.
For years, I've been saying that the work of DEI is good work. It's necessary work, and it was long overdue back in the day. And I just want to say thank you all for stepping up and doing the work. It's been really hard work. And it's no longer long overdue. It's just part of who we are. So much appreciated. Thank you.
And before we wrap up, Patty, come on up. Late breaking public comment.
It's more questions that that's why I wasn't sure if I wanted to say something or not. So my name is Patty Wonk. The first thing I wanted to ask, I don't know who this would be directed to. So one of my kids told me that he had a great year this year. And I said, oh, why? And he said, because my teacher doesn't play favorites. And I said, oh, so does your teacher normally play favorites? He said, oh, yes. And I said, well, sometimes you the favorite? And he said, oh, yes. I said, what about this year? He said, I wouldn't know because the teacher doesn't play favorites. And I thought it was really interesting. He's had some fantastic teachers over the years. But what this brought me to was I was wondering if there's any unconscious bias training for teachers. Because especially in elementary school, I feel like, oh man, I used to see these two kids all the time getting picked up and the teacher would give them negative reviews every day. It was 3 kids, 1 white kid, 2 black kids, the only 2 black kids in the class every day. And it killed me. So that was actually years ago. And I think that consciousness has changed, but I was just wondering if that happens at all. The second thing is, I have heard with incidences in school that there might be a rise of some, I don't know if it's behavior or acting out issues, especially among Asian boys. And I'm wondering if anything is being done about that on any level. And then finally, a question about kids' equity, because I still hear that people feel like kids who have either better placed parents or more rare parents are more treated I don't want to say fairly, but maybe more gingerly. So I just was wondering if that could be addressed too. Thank you.
Staff, any thoughts? Like the unconscious bias training and some of the things Patty brought up?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Patty. We have done some training with our staff members around unconscious bias as well as rights and responsibilities of our staff members. And Dr. Lindholm did a training recently with all of our certificated teachers and staff members that also touched on those areas. So yes, for sure. And then did you want to jump in about the other questions?
I'm not sure about the specifically Asian American boys issue. So Patty, if you can connect with me after and give more specific information, I'll look into it. Same with the third one. Wasn't sure about the gingerly treatment of certain kids and that. Again, if I have more information, I'll be glad to look into it. Thank you.
And if I could just add conversations I've overheard anecdotally with teachers in the classroom, they try different strategies on how they call on kids because they know they may favor a particular side of the classroom over another. So I know teachers have experimented with standing in different parts of the room to determine if they favor a certain side of how they're standing, or maybe loud students maybe get a little more attention. So they do different strategies to try to call on kids a little bit more fairly. So I know those conversations are happening with the teachers.
And then just in terms of administrative response to disciplinary actions, potentially based on, parent position or wealth or anything like that. I think our administration works very, very hard to, assess each situation, investigate, and then to sort of mete out disciplinary consequences that are consistent and aligned with the infraction, to really use it as a tool for learning to improve behaviors. There's been a real focus at the elementary school on positive behavior intervention and supports. And that is all sort of staged with rubrics and designed to provide a lot of consistency and fairness in its application. And so I think that if there are any reports on that, please share with Anais. But I feel like we've made noticeable and important gains on just that consistency, measurability, and fair treatment as so that there's an application that pretty much is pervasive and consistent whenever there's a disciplinary infraction.
And another byproduct of benefit from the oversight team, there were several situations, I think a couple of times this year, where parents brought up scenarios that they had come across, and we had really blown out discussion on, well, how do we avoid that in the context of what we're trying to do in our work? And so it was some tough and emotional but growing powerful conversation that happened. And so I think we want to embrace it and try to work on stuff and get better every day versus somehow ignoring it. But I know the executive oversight, or the DI oversight team committee, had a lot of that kind of conversation going on, which was powerful. We're ready to move the second item.
Yes.
Okay.
Will you vote
To approve? Do I have a motion?
Receive and file?
To receive and file our second year, where we are on our DI plan.
I'll make that motion.
I already did.
Oh, I'll second it then.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you to Hugo and Sugi for all your work this year. Appreciate it. Mean that.
Thank you, Sugi.
So who's going to lead us on the sub part of that, which is our glossary of terms around the DI, which really was the heart of a lot of discussion.
Yeah. So I'll do a little bit of formal introduction, but then go off script a little bit. So with this item, the governing board is requested to engage in review and discussion of the LCUSD DEI glossary of terms and take action to adopt it. As we've indicated in the former presentation, is that this was an item that we anticipated being able to accomplish in year one of the plan. We quickly realized that it was a cumbersome task with a lot of room for engagement, conversation, feedback, editing, review, editing, review, editing, review. Just this year, the drafts of the DEI glossary of terms have been brought to the Oversight Committee 4 times. It's been discussed and feedback has been taken at the October, February, March, and May meetings. I have to commend the committee for its engagement. They reviewed the glossary of terms each time, provided feedback on terms that might just not sit quite right, looked for consistency in terms of definitions, in terms of sources, and really provided excellent feedback for Dr. Lindholm and I to review. I have to thank Dr. Lindholm, who is one of our DEI subject matter experts, for her research and scholarship in working with district staff and the DEIOC. I think she has a really nice credibility in terms of being a scholar and an academic, and also someone who is very thoughtful and listens to feedback with a very fine lens and makes changes and nuances. So we couldn't ask for someone better to work with. But with that consistent editing, we winnowed it down so that it would be a usable resource and one that would be welcomed, hopefully by the community. It's a year and a half in production, but we're pleased to present it to tonight to the governing board for review and approval. And Dr. Lindholm is here again, so thank you for being here and look forward to any board questions or comments.
Who wants to tee it up? See none, I can. Or go ahead.
I just wanted to say, as someone who was not a part of this process, but heard about the length and time that was put into this, I have to say I was really impressed. It was nice to see a list of definitions. I know there was a lot of thought put into what is included in, and it's not, you know, there's no possible complete list of definitions. So I appreciated the thoughtfulness both on the definitions themselves and which words to include. And we know it's not exhaustive, but I think it's a great start and a great way to sort of have a common language as we continue our further discussions. So thank you to everybody on the committee and everyone on staff who did. I know.
You know, and Josh, that was the key term. I think on our very first oversight meeting, the heart of the discontent was not being sure what everybody meant by certain terminology and certain words. And so we needed to come up with a common launch point for the community. You may not agree with everything in it. And we also said that it's potentially going to evolve as society evolves. And we've already seen, even in 2 years, things have kind of taken a left and a right turn around some of the context of terms. And there was some discussion, do we need a glossary? But in the end, everybody really wanted to get us in the common language and nomenclature and everything about what we're doing here. Even if you don't agree with all the components, it allowed us to have a consistent frame of reference. And I think that's why it took a long time and the iterations and trying to get it right. And some terms didn't make it in, and some we're feeling they're going to definitely evolve. So.
And then I hadn't mentioned it, but just, you know, some of the concern on the committee and possibly from the community is, what are we going to do with this? And so it's not something that, you know, that we intend it to be a living document. It will be on the website. It will be, it's embraced with full transparency. It will be part of the parent notifications that go out annually at the beginning of each school year. It'll be included in teacher resources, welcome back packets. I know that, you know, for the older grade levels where appropriate, teachers will reference it, you know, as it comes up in class. But it really is, to your point, Joe, just trying to give common definitions in a very academic way, because we are a local educational agency and we have a sort of a commitment to being transparent and working from a common definitional place on some of these terms that are really part of the fabric of our language as a society today.
Do we have any online comments about the glossary? I think I saw one earlier.
Correct. We only have one online comment.
Let's just take a second to double check that board. Okay. And nothing in person, right? Any other comments then? Then do I have a motion to approve as part of our output of our year 2, which is supposed to be year 1 plan, but it's been delivered. Do we have a motion to approve the glossary terms as it exists?
So moved.
Second, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations and thanks to the oversight team and everybody on staff and it's been evolved along the way as this thing grew over time in a very positive way. So thank you. Okay, so we're now moving into a very different topic. We're going to move to a 12C on our agenda, and this is a 12D, sorry. It's the RFP, request for proposal, related to the stadium license. The caveat to this is, and maybe Wendy or Melissa would do that, is no decision from us tonight. This is really an inform out to the folks as an interim step in this process so we can hear feedback and potentially gauge a dialogue. We knew this is important for different groups. We are hearing some comments and engagement on this, and we wanted to put it as an agenda item. So with that, Melissa?
Correct. So just as a summary, the governing board is requested to review the RFP tonight for LCHS stadium license and engage in discussion. There will be no decision made tonight. We plan to hopefully bring a recommendation to the board at its June 27th meeting. We have posted this online on our website as well as published in the Outlook and the Glendale News Press. Bids are due by 4 p.m. on June 14th, and it can again be found on our website. We have a tentative scheduled calendar on there. And again, I met with LCHS sports, their teams, the band, and all of the other administration there to go through what the needs are specifically for the high school to make sure that we took those into play when we added the hours to the schedule. And there were a couple of changes that might be made. And as we go through a possible license agreement, we would update any of those. A couple of community members mentioned some dates that possibly were wrong. I wanted to notate that those are non-instructional days. So those are no students on campus. So that's why they are full days, but we would take that into account as well. And the district would still have priority and be able to take back any hours as needed for their priority. And with that, I open it for however you want to proceed on this.
Okay, any comments, observations from the board, or do you want to get to public comments right away? It's up to you.
I did have one question. I noticed in the next agenda item, which is where we're talking about the supplemental agreement, we have the high school hours of the high school fields extend to 11 p.m. And on this, the field is typically on a weekday 8 to 10 p.m. Is there a reason why we have joint use going to 11 and the stadium license agreement going till 10?
So for this one, for the license, it was historically offered till 10 p.m. They are there till about 10:30 currently with the lights on, and then they turn them off when they leave. So they do have a little bit of leeway to clean up and move off of campus, but we wouldn't want them much later than that.
I just wanted just to have consistent, since we are going to, potentially put the hours, we're gonna put them into the supplemental agreement and they go till 11. I'm just unsure why we're not.
Well, the stadium is not part of joint use.
No, well, I understand that.
Yeah.
It's just joint that we've got, that the joint use then would be the fields just south of the
Adjacent.
stadium and just, whatever, northeast of the stadium, and those go till 11 and the stadium, it just,
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we'd have differing hours on something like that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we could look to, we don't have the authority to single-handedly amend the joint use school and non-school hours. So if there was a desire for the board to have consistency, we do have the prerogative with the license agreement. Part of the beauty of the license agreement, it gives the district a lot of autonomous control. And so therefore, if it was a board desire to have those hours extended to 11 o'clock, it would be something that we could do. I mean, I think in keeping with challenge success, the 10 o'clock time with a little bit of bleed over for cleanup and all of that, we want to get kids home and hopefully quieted down with homework or sleep time. But we'll take board direction.
I totally support that. I just, well, I mean, I'm not sure that the license agreement would necessarily affect it. Depending on what would happen, it might have less impact on our students than joint use would. But I do think there's value in having it all be having it be one end time rather than having two separate end times. And I always had, the reason I brought it up was because I thought maybe the adjustment was here or not there, which I know is much more complicated. But anyway, I just wanted to point it out. And I know this is a work in progress.
I just want to add a little bit that this is a request for proposals, so that a proposal could come in saying that the user group wants to use it till midnight or 11 o'clock or 10:30. And those would all be considered by the board as to what the appropriate use of the field is. And it may be that no one has an interest in going past 10 o'clock, or maybe other people may have an interest in going at 10 o'clock. So I think it's still an open question, even though the request for proposal is written with a certain framework in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the proposals will look like.
Okay, any other comments? Because we have some online to kind of make sure we're digesting real quick, take a look at, and I believe we're going to have in person 7. Okay.
Maybe Joe, just real quickly, these two agenda items, while they are separate, are sort of related in a way, in that ever since the school hours were changed, there's been an increasing need for field use in the afternoon. Our school hours were pushed back to 8:30, first by our district and then later through the state action mandating it. Then when other high schools also pushed back to later hours, it reduced the amount of time our own athletes had on the field in the afternoon, creating a compression of field use. Added to that was an increased desire by various sports. We have sports that weren't played previously, new sports, 7-8 sports, JV sports, freshman sports. We have a lot more sports programs that are also increasing the pressures on our fields. When our school hours first changed, we approached the city about extending the hours that we could use our own fields. We did not meet with much success. The second item, though, does talk about a half-hour extension, but basically both these two items are related in that we all recognize that there is a heavy demand for fields in our community and a heavy demand for fields by our student athletes.
Thank you, Dan. Well said. Okay, so let's take just take 30 seconds to a minute here. Take a look at the online comments. Board members, please, real quick. We good? Okay, so let's move into, let me just take a peek. What do we have here? So we have 7. Okay, I'm just going to go in the order I received them, Irene. Is that how you received them? Okay. Let's go, Mr. Boyd. Did I see Dave here? Oh, there you are. Okay, Mr. Boyd, come on up. David Boyd, community member. And about the stadium license.
The on button. Okay. There's a timer there. So good evening. I'm not here to discuss pickleball. So,
Watch out, Wayne might still be.
So my name is David Boyd. My wife Liz and I were 12-year residents of La Cañada. And I'm here to support LA Surf Soccer Club, which uses the LCHS field. We have 2 children who are or have been in the LCUSD school system. My youngest just finished up at Palmcrest. She's one of the ones that graduated. She's heading off to LCHS 7-8 next year. My son did the same, went through LCH 7-H, and then he was off to prep. He's now a junior. And I'm very excited to say that he got recruited this year as a junior very early by the Naval Academy to play soccer. That's D1 soccer. So we're very happy about that. This is a top academic school, and it's probably the only D1 school in the country where you can be a STEM major and actually be a D1 athlete. So it's very happy about that. And it's not really just about getting in, but for these schools, as you well know, though, this college is very important for the members of the community. Not just about playing soccer, but they have to have excellent academics, and you also have to have a lot of community involvement. And La Cañada is very much about community. As we had this past weekend, we had the Memorial Day parade. And I know for at least my son is very involved with his Boy Scouts, with the LCPC Church, the La Cañada Flammers Youth Council, Harambe Ministries. So it's a very important part of this. And there are very few good soccer clubs around that you're going to be playing at a national level. So, and LA Surf is one of them. So to take part in this, we're here in La Cañada. We can do these things. We can do the extracurriculars. We're not having to drive to Orange County 2 hours each way to be part of a comparable club. LA Surf is a national class soccer club, and you have the ability, all ranges of ability, but you're able to play at a really national, even an international level. So just sort of in summary, what I'm saying is that Surf is a national organization, and it really provides an opportunity for our residents here be exposed to top college coaches. You can play in showcases where you're being seen by the top schools in the country. And allows, having it here allows the student athletes to be very involved in the community. I mean, for example, my son on a Monday night will be studying till 6:30. He goes to Boy Scouts, and he's off to the high school to practice. And this is kind of a typical thing, but you get a lot of involvement here, and it just would not be possible if we were someplace else. And also SURF gives exposure to a lot of different, a wider community. It's a destination for a lot of players from all over Los Angeles. You get to meet people from all different walks of life, and also coaches. They do a good job of getting coaches from all over the world. So we have coaches from Morocco, coaches from Italy, coaches from England, coach and Mexican coaches. So it's a great diversity for the players. Anyway, I thank you for your time and the consideration, and I hope that we will keep consistent hours and plenty of hours for LA Surf Soccer Club.
Thanks, Mr. Boyd. Congratulations to your daughter on her promotion. That's
Very
great.
happy.
Okay, so then any questions for Dave? We're good. Since we got a few comments, why don't we keep moving? Appreciate it. Okay, next up, Barry Ritson. Come on up, Barry.
Thank you. Thank you. Since 1987, club soccer has been an important part of the community of La Cañada, part of this village, as Joe put it earlier. 1987, I was 5 years old. Club soccer in La Cañada has worked hand in hand with the school district, and we raised the bar. I mean, even back in 1996, there was boys from Texas that came to La Cañada. Louis Billowitz put them in houses and put them with families, and our La Cañada, high school team was the best in the country. That was Louis Billowitz. That was a long time ago for those that know Louis. And Josh Henderson, that was a long time ago. Both those gentlemen are now in the La Cañada Hall of Fame. Many people don't know that. That's where our roots started, and that's where our roots can be traced back to. Way further back than the first initial field agreement at La Cañada in 2003. That agreement happened because LCHS boys program under Don Shepard actually lost a game at the high school due to the weather and due to the conditions of the field. Don Shepard wouldn't forget the soggy pitch. And ultimately, when they were beat, he famously quoted, "I became highly motivated when I watched that soccer match. The field was deplorable and there were puddles everywhere." The rain affected both teams, of course, but you just don't want to see games settled in those conditions. So in 2003, with over $1.3 million invested, a plan was created. The club and the boosters would work hand in hand to make sure that they could fund any replacements, any maintenance needed on the field. Well, that lasted until 2005, when the boosters dropped the ball, pardon the pun, and LA Surf organization picked it up and came through with all those commitments financially. From there, with every renewal, came more and more restrictions on usage, more money for less time. Every time we adjusted, every single text, call, email from a school coach, director, or employee was answered every time we adjusted. Through COVID, we paid our share. Through pool projects, we moved up with our friends from the La Cañada Sports Coalition to dance around the closures. We will complete the RFP and we'll meet the deadline. We will do what we can to keep our home. We ask that the use schedule is reviewed. It's impossible for us to have teams out at 10 o'clock at night. It's in conflict with what we want for our students and our young children. We're a critical part of this community, and bringing another user group into the city would have a dramatic impact on other field availability in the city, referenced by Dan. Our teams will find their way in this city. Our teams aren't going anywhere. We will find our way onto grass fields. Those grass fields will get beaten up. It will be in conflict with the other user groups. And ultimately the fields will suffer. So for us, we hope the transactional nature of the RFP and how it's written can be worked on together as partners for the betterment of our community. Our history and our track record should surpass a highest bid mentality. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Barry. Marco, back to back. Marco Quezada, the LC Sports Coalition.
Do I got to hit a button? No. All right. Good evening, board and school district representatives. I'm Marco Quezada, and I've been part of this community for about 25 years, for over 25 years. I love soccer. My kids love soccer, and I know this community loves soccer. And that's based on the fact that we have 3 first premier division professional teams in Los Angeles with the women's team and the 2 men's teams. My kids went to La Cañada schools, and my daughter played at the La Cañada on the La Cañada High School team. Went to CIF. I've been part of the La Cañada Sports Coalition for over 20 years and represented both AYSO and the local soccer club. Barry speaks of how the agreement that was made with Don Shepard, that the boosters dropped their commitment. And I was president of the club, and between Barry and I, we figured out how to pay the boosters' share as well as our share. I've stayed connected even after my kids are long gone. My baby's 25 now, but I'm here because I love soccer, and I think soccer needs to stay in this community. Many of you have asked me how much longer I'm going to be around. With this situation happening annually, I think I'll be around for a long time, and I'm being forced to. I work with these user groups, baseball, softball, in trying to play some sort of Sudoku with the fields, as you all know. But any changes in the usage on the turf field is going to be drastic on the grass fields. All we'll be doing is moving off the turf field and playing on fields that I was hoping to stay off of this year, which was the varsity baseball field after all that work that was done there recently. But with the field usage being cut, I don't know how, on the stadium, I don't know how we're going to be able to do that. On top of that, I believe that the level of soccer at the high school has dropped because we don't have the youngers practicing on those fields anymore. I saw on Facebook just recently a La Cañada family trying to convince people to go to Ferraro Fields, that it's not that far. I'm trying to create a La Cañada LA surf team, is what the woman wrote, and trying to convince people that Ferraro wasn't that far. That's by the Griffith Park Zoo. Anyways, I also believe that due to limited use, that the younger kids aren't being taken care of. And I believe that there'll be a ripple effect. I think the usage of the field will be disastrous for all sports. Lastly, if the rumors are true that the booster clubs is going to put in their own proposal for the RFP, I think that that's not being transparent and not being truthful to everybody else that's trying to use that field, because I don't believe they'll be using the field. And with the limited time that you guys have put on that in that RFP, I'm not sure who's going to be able to use it from 9 to 10 o'clock. So I'm advocating for our proposal to maybe have some change in times, and I'd like you guys to rethink the whole thing. And I'm done with. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for the service to our community across all those years. Let's see here. Sugi, come on up. From DEI to stadium license.
Sugi Sorensen, parent. I'm just speaking as a parent here. I'm kind of curious about, I noticed all the public comments online were from people specifically supporting LA Surf, and LA Surf is here, but all you're doing is soliciting for an RFP. But I just wanted to bring my perspective as a parent. There are other kids in our La Cañada schools who don't have field space. I'll speak specifically to lacrosse. Dan and Octavia, you have sons who played in the program. That part of trying to, in the years that my son has played since 7th grade, most of the time we've been playing on fields other than La Cañada High School because we have not had access to those fields. In the current, we were fortunate to be able to have the varsity team practice on the field for at least the spring season, but in the off season, which is anyone who has a kid who plays sports knows very important, the club teams need to be going all year round. So the La Cañada High School varsity coach is paying $200 an hour to use a field
in Glendale because he can't get access to our own field. And I think this same dilemma is faced by other community sports programs that are using have need for field space. So I would just ask that you please consider the needs of not just LA Surf or our high school teams, that there's a lot of competition for that use, and please consider all parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Sugi. I think John MacArthur, did I have it right, MacArthur? Okay, great. Come on up.
Great, thanks. John MacArthur, La Cañada dad, got a 5th grader and an 8th grader. One of them plays lacrosse, Sugi, so I've got that experience as well. But one of them joined LA Premier back in like 2017, 2016. It seemed very integral to the La Cañada community. That team, that club, transitioned into surf. Surf came from La Jolla, California, where they were, pulling players from all over San Diego, making the best club. They have expanded and they brought their quality, their philosophy up to LA, and they chose La Cañada as the location, which I felt kind of special when we switched over to surf, and I got to meet some of the coaches and Barry, and like, it's a really good organization, really good soccer, and it's really core to improving the quality of soccer and keeping it as good as it was, it sounds like. So I just want to say surf is a good club, but that's like my personal experience. I think, it's important for the next generation to have that opportunity. And if we don't have that high quality soccer available, less students, less young kids will get involved from La Cañada. And I would hate to see that happen. My daughter is old enough where we're willing to drive now to John Ferraro. We're willing to drive wherever we have to go because she's, part of that group. But in that first decision, that first year it would be very tough to drive to San Marino or, the LA Zoo area. But as stepping away from my own specific experience, I realized that there are other sports, other uses of that field that could be good. So the main thing is just recognize that there are monetary value that these groups bring. There's also non-monetary value. There's also risk. There's also risk of not using the field, the field's going unused, or having a bad tenant, a bad partner. And I think surf has been a good partner. So I encourage you to factor all of that in. And then in my last 50 seconds, give you a food for thought, maybe, that if there is so much demand for fields and for turf fields specifically, because they don't get worn out very fast. I don't know exactly the ratio of pool area to swimmers versus field area to field users, including band and lots of different groups that use fields. But we might want to think about, since we did invest quite a bit in a pool for what I imagine is a fairly small community, we may want to invest in fields like that baseball field improvement, possibly turn that turf, or there's a field just south of here that's all grass still. And it is, I think, LCUSD property, and it could be used for high school sports in the off season, or, licensing out to other groups or various other purposes. So we may want to think about the long-term solution to this problem that just keeps coming up. And I'll yield back I'll finish there.
No, thank you. And just because this is agendized, thank you for the comments. We do have a joint use committee that the school district and the city helps with, and then the Park and Rec committee. And this is absolutely a dilemma that cuts across all of us. The field space is not enough. And we have a group in motion for a couple of years now working on a field master plan. And where can we find field space? It's either you got to buy fields, partner with other communities adjacent to us, or try to get more out of the fields you have, right? And so things like turf and all that are all things that are routinely discussed, and we just got to figure out as a community how to mobilize. But in the short term, how do you kind of make the puzzle fit, right? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Mr. Klein, I see you back there, very patient. Adam Klein. MPA.
Adam Klein, MPA, which is Music Parent Association. I represent approximately 225 families in the Music Parent Association, and the band, which is the high school portion, uses the stadium for Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And I just want to make sure that you guys prioritize our time slot. The majority of the time last year was more flexible. I think Mr. Stone had talked to LA Surf about giving us a little more leeway on each side, but there's up to that point, there was always this constriction. And I do feel that the priority should be to the students, because band is a curriculum. It should be to the students of Locking County Unified and not a club. I just want to make sure that is the priority. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, a couple more. Mr. Page, Wayne Page, Spartan Boosters. Wayne wears a lot of hats in this community.
All right. Sorry, the delivery just disappeared.
While we're waiting, Melissa, again, just to reiterate, you did talk to all the user groups at our high school to see how much time they need on our fields.
Correct. I sent them a draft of the calendar with the hours that are posted online, and we made some revisions to take into account specifically band needs or football needs on Friday and other practices on Saturdays.
I'm good. I'm back. I have two things to talk about, so I can jump them together or come back. The first one is about where we talked about. The other part is related about the Civic Center Act. So let me just go through the first part and I can come back or continue, whatever you
Got
want.
3 minutes.
Okay. I'm here representing Spartan Boosters as an executive board member to talk about the need for the athletic field space for our 7 to 12 students. I spoke a year ago to the board that our students are in dire need of athletics field space, and the board is just talking about it as well. And I also just spoke at the joint use meeting 2 weeks ago. The demand exceeds capacity, as we know, and as I said, the boards also stated this. Not only is it tough for the existing programs, but there are sports and teams that don't exist because of it. Freshman, JV, 7-8 teams that cannot exist because of lack of space. I'm also commissioner on Park and Rec in town, and our committee approved 100% of the field requests for LCUSD. I asked the city manager if the city had ever not granted field request space for the district, and the answer is no, with one exception for a baseball request that was right before a game was about to start. So where's the problem? It's the football field not being available to our students because LCUSD has been selling, and it doesn't really matter who we're selling it to. It's just that they've been selling 2,600 hours a year for $40,000 a year, which is about $15 an hour. Creates enormous stress and anxiety and frustration to the athletics and other programs. So without knowing that the district had put forth an RFP, because we didn't know, I spoke at the joint use meeting. We didn't find out about the RFP until after that meeting. At Boosters, we were just willing to fundraise $40,000 and give it to the district, if that was the amount of money that would make the difference, and give all the time back to the district. That sounds like a pretty good idea. The field space in the district, and the reason the Civic Center Act, I'm not going to talk about it right now, but the reason the Civic Center Act is it's specific to school districts for public space. It's not written for the town. It's written for school districts for public field space. It's public field space. It's supposed to go to the students first. Everything else is an add-on. There are no requirements to sell it to any private organization. It doesn't matter. So after looking at the RFP, we actually think the direction that the district is moving is really great. But we want to clarify what I spoke about a year ago. Our purpose is offering to help here is not to raise more money for athletics and arts, which is what we do. That's what the Boosters does. It's first and foremost to give all the time back to LCH athletics Monday through Friday. We don't think you should be selling anything during the week, just a weekend for a 1-year trial. Let's see what everyone needs. Let's see rains happen. Maybe we can form some more teams.
I know as a Park and Recs commissioner, the thousands of hours that we give to the school district for fields across town. That is not helping anybody. So instead of our kids walking out and playing on their own field, they're going across town. If all those kids was to come back and be on their field, it would be more convenient for everybody. Everything would be better. And guess what? Those spaces would open up. And now you have freshman teams and 7-8 teams and things that could exist there. When it's a hot week, you suddenly could have, the football field open for football team to have a night game. All this stuff is expressed all the time. There's been some reason that the old agreements that have been done have continued. The old lease expired in 2018, and the existing one says, whereas where the parties wish to terminate any and all existing duties and obligations or rights between the district and LAS. So this is an annual agreement. There's no legacy to it. It expired, and the value of that original agreement, which was $1.3 million, is $6 to $7 million at a regular rate, over $20 million at the rate card for the district. Since it was brought up, Boosters is a volunteer organization. Like all we do is raise money for the school district, which is about $100,000 to $150,000 a year, and we give it all to arts, athletics, and enrichment. That is our mission. So whatever happened 10 years ago, where Boosters, frankly, was never mentioned as a part of the original agreement until tonight, Boosters was part of the original agreement. But if they ever dropped out, my guess it was because, first of all the money they were giving was to another part for the school district. And at 40 grand a year, frankly, a private organization can pay $15 an hour. So all of us in Boosters weren't there then, but I'm sure there was a good reason. Again, we're volunteers and all we do is raise 6 figures a year for the school district. So just to wrap up, what we would really like is for the district to take a pause, listen to the coaches and stuff. I know you guys reached out, but we've been talking to them for years. And again, I see the field use from a city component too, is we want you to take a breath, give the school LCH 7 through 12, give them the week, give them a year, let them figure out what they need. Let some new sports happen. Let everyone be closer to home and closer to the district and less stress, away games that become home games for track, things like that. Sell Sundays, so probably most of Saturdays, and then see how it goes. Then the following year, my guess is there would be time that would open up during the week. It might be maybe there's 3 hours one night, none on another night, something like that. But I'm just saying, give your guys, give the program, and it's LA Surf's an excellent organization, it has nothing to do with that. Okay. It's a public space. It goes to the public first, and everybody is second. We don't owe anything to anybody but the public, which is our students. Thanks.
Thank you, Wayne. Last but not least, Jolene O'Brien, come on up. Or do we have a second one, Reggie?
All right, thank you. I'm Jolene O'Brien. Most of you know me associated with lacrosse, but I'm going to advocate for all LCHS sports. I'm going to put a voice, piggyback a little bit what Wayne was saying, but just a little bit of history for some of you who don't know. I think it's been more than 7 years ago I stood before you. Some of you were here then. And advocated to start new lacrosse teams. And you're like, sure, but prove it. Like, go right ahead. And so we've spent the last 7 years building the middle school and the high school lacrosse teams. And I'm happy to say, even with the pandemic interrupting, we're back to over 30 kids per team. Now, to get to this point has been pretty challenging because those first years, we rented Hahamunga and paid $6,000 to rent over there just for the season. And all that money that paid for that rental came from parent donations. Gopher holes, knee injuries, sprained ankles. We had kids out for the season because they got hurt on that field over there. But that's all we had because we were told no fields for us at all. During that same years when we were playing club as high school, I had to rent the Glendale Sports Complex. I even rented the field at Occidental College because I was told that I couldn't have a field at my own high school. $200 an hour is what I was paying with our parents' money in order to just have a lacrosse team. So now we're a CIF team. I'm thrilled. Great. You know, we've got a new coach. So this year, 7-8 told that they couldn't practice and that they would have to go down to Cornishon and they could have the field from 4 to 5 o'clock. So you can't have a practice for an hour. And how do you get 7th and 8th graders on a bus with all their lacrosse equipment down there after getting out of school? So we couldn't start practice till March. And we got that little tiny grass spot on the other side of the baseball field. You can't practice lacrosse in a tiny little square grass field that's covered in mud. Our high school teams, both girls and the boys, had to split the football field in order to practice and had to be off by 6 o'clock. So you can't have a proper practice in an hour and a half. And they're rushing to get off of it. Even when our games went long, Surf City guys, you were hovering around us and stealing our lacrosse balls. So I want to advocate not just for lacrosse, but for all our sports, because our students should come first. Our team should come first. And I firmly believe that. And I've been fighting for this for years. So I decided to show up and say something at the last minute. Also, just a little bit, I think what Sugi kind of mentioned too is, you know, some of our challenges in hiring qualified and keeping good coaches. What we can offer them in order as an incentive to stay and all across all of our sports is our facilities off season so that they can do workshops and they can do extra practices and other kinds of games with our kids. It's all La Cañada kids, but give them that opportunity off season and not just lacrosse, but all of the sports should have that opportunity. And it's not just about soccer, it's all the sports, the track, the football, the lacrosse, the baseball, everybody. So that's my my wish, and please put LCHS students first.
Thank you, Jolene. Okay, so we have Reggie, come on up. I know you submitted, you'd like to talk real quick, 3 minutes worth at least.
Perfect. I just want to piggyback off Jolene and lacrosse and all things. We've been here for the last couple of hours, and most of the time we've talked about diversity, equity, inclusion. So I want to include soccer and include all sport. I want to talk about the field space and how, just talk about spring and lacrosse. I have 3 daughters. They all play lacrosse, but let's talk about the spring sport and how a 6-period track and field goes to 4:30, and the lacrosse teams can't start until 4:30 and they have to be off at 6. So that gives an hour and a half for a JV team for boys, a girls team if we had one, but there's a JV team and a girls JV 7-8. The 7-8 can't actually play during the spring season because there's not enough field space. So they actually play in the fall, which is contrary to how CIF plays. So we have only an hour to spend, and the boys and girls have to share a field, which I think is not acceptable. It's a RFP, and I wanted this to be 2-way. Does that mean the 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock hour on the RFP start time does that mean it can be changed? It can be moved forward?
I think what it means is that we've requested each interested user group to submit a proposal, and we don't know what each user group may be submitting. There may be other people who are interested that aren't even here tonight. And it's what we'll do is we'll review all the proposals. We'll see which one appears to meet the needs of the district best, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to fit what was published. It can be, the proposal can be different than that. It can be mostly that. It can be some changes to that. It also can be one of those things where we can look at one of the proposals and say, this is really good, but we want to make this tweak, and see if that tweak is agreeable to the person who made the proposal. So I think that's our next step, is to see what the proposals come in and what they look like.
So I'm just an advocate for all sport to be able to, for all kids to play whatever sport they want. And I think there's plenty of opportunity for clubs to play soccer, for a lot of things, but lacrosse is a sport that's growing, and the kids need space in order for that sport to grow. And it is still the fastest growing sport on the West Coast. And if we don't offer that to our kids are not going to have to play. As it stands, our girls lacrosse team has had to pull out. Our Sierra Madre Our CIF section doesn't even have another team that plays. So we actually have to go out and play against other teams as an at-large member now with CIF. The last thing is that there are other sports, CIF is now allowed or sanctioned girls flag football. And when are they going to be able to play? And are they going to get a chance to play? There's opportunities out there for our kids to play, and we should continue to focus on DEI. And I think by not having enough field space, we're closing our options off to our children. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, everybody. We got a lot to think about. We're going to wait to see middle of the month and we'll have a chance to revisit, but this is why we want to do this tonight, because we didn't think coming in at the end of June with just the big reveal would be fit for a purpose here. So thank you for everybody who showed up, and your input will be onboarded and taken into consideration. So.
Yeah, before we leave the topic, there was a public comment submitted on a non-agendized item. It might be appropriate for us to talk about that a little bit. The public comment was a request to redo the field. And just it may be good for Melissa to prepare some information for our next meeting. That field was, as one of our public speakers mentioned, originally built way back around 2003. It was refurbished in 2016. New turf field was put in at that time. One of the agreements with the original lease was that enough money would be put aside to be able to replace it about every 10 years. That's about the life expectancy, 10 to 15 years. In 2016, the field was replaced. And at that time, a decision was made to make the field not one of those that uses the hard rubber little pellets, because we were experiencing a lot of injuries that were getting infected from the little black rubber pellets. And so a different material was used, and that's what the field is made of now. Also at that time, the district decided to request and install the state-of-the-art concussion protection stuff underneath it. So the field is padded underneath with protection stuff. But Melissa, it might be good for you if you could pull up the specifications for the field, because I think there's some misunderstanding. I've heard some talk in the community about the field is unsafe because it's not concussion safe, and also that people would like to go back to the black pellets. And I think that it might be good to just address those issues so we can explain what happened with the field back in 2016.
I also think, just to know we're wrapping this up, but that this is an interesting meeting in that we have this stadium lease proposal, stadium license proposal, and we're going to talk about our joint use hours, and we're going to talk about our budget, which are the three things that are kind of all intersecting in this conversation. So I think as we move forward, there's a lot of conversation on how this puzzle fits together, because we have worked very, very, very hard to get 5:30 codified, even though what we really want is 6:30 for our students on joint use. So I think as we move forward, there's going to be more conversation with the city and more conversation about how we maximize our field time. And then as we look at our budget, we're going to have a big discussion about the fact that there are some significant challenges coming up. And so that is all part of the factor of, the decision we make has to sort of fulfill a lot of obligations.
And I think to that end, Jolene mentioned the challenges of trying to get our kids to practice on the Cornichon fields where they have to be off by 5. And as our next agenda item is, the city is proposing we keep the Cornichon field only to 5 o'clock. And that is challenging in that it is very hard for the kids of the high school to leave the high school, get down there and have a meaningful practice and be done by 5 o'clock. So that's definitely a challenge on that scheduling issue.
Well, the good news is too, the joint use, there's been some good fruitful commitment by Parks and Rec and others to try to crack the code there. And, Wayne's mentioned that he does work really hard, that committee, to give LC pole position when we can across these fields. But the city did purchase and is going to be working on a scheduling system so we can really have some history in terms of what the real demand is and seasonally, and trying to work all that out and take the next step of sophistication here. So we're going to be doing some groundwork to get more data driven and fact driven in terms of some of our decisions around this, but a lot of eyes, a lot of passionate, caring people to try to work through this. And our biggest remit is to make sure the district stays financially solvent along the way with some of these asks. And so that has to be certainly considered along the way. Okay, thank you, Dan, for bringing that up around the online comment and circling back on that. Okay, so let's move into the next item, which is related, but it is something that we've been working on for quite a while, and it is related to some of the output of the discussions related to pickleball and things like that. But that's item 12E, the approve supplemental agreement that we now have to. How do you want to set this up? On you going to talk about it because it's came back from the city, and we wanted to take the right approach here is to view it and to formally approve it.
Thank you. So as background, this item regards our desire to amend school hours as identified in the joint use master agreement with the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge. At our March 28th, 2023 governing board meeting, the board took action to approve the extension of the LCHS school day hours definition from 5 to 5:30, and it authorized the superintendent to execute the agreement and forward it to the city manager for consideration and approval by the La Cañada Flint Ridge City Council. In response, on April 18th, 2023, city staff recommended that the city council approved the attached supplemental agreement number 2302, and the city council authorized the city manager to execute the agreement. Because the supplemental agreement 2302 was sent back to us, district staff took the time and verified all of the hours contained in the supplemental agreement, and they matched with those identified in the joint use master agreement. All are accurate. So now, in order to have a fully executed agreement to the joint use master agreement, district staff is requesting that the governing board approve supplemental agreement 2302, and that will amend the joint use master agreement and be sent back to the city to receive and file.
Yeah, I mean, I have some comments on this. I think as a setup, and you basically hit it. It's been really important to us to codify the 5:30, not just for field uses, but also to be able to, for safety and security purposes, know who's on our campus during what period of time. And so 5:30 was a kind of an important line in the sand for us in terms of joint use permitting and for safety and security as well. We sent the 5:30 request to the city. The city really when they sent it back to us, went beyond what we asked for, and that was fine. They wanted to take another look at all the hours, change some gentleman agreements that have been in place, and just kind of codify what's been kind of offline agreements. And the due diligence of the staff was appreciated. But we felt we had to approve this in order to be in sync with what city council approved. So that's why we're taking this step to just make sure everything's okay. There is an online comment along the way too, if you could take a look. It's related to probably the other agenda item, but just take a look. Comments, Dan, I think you're ready to.
Yeah, Joe and I were on agenda planning this last week. And so Joe and I already had talked a little bit about this, and I had two questions, and I know our staff looked into those, but maybe we can just talk about both those. The first was that I brought up that one day I was walking by and I noticed that there was a soccer team a couple of weeks ago playing on what's called the FIS lower field, and it was a team wearing green uniforms, and we were trying to figure out, is that a school team? Who is that was there? And I understand, Jamie, you were able to look into it and find out.
Sorry, yes, I was able to confirm with our athletic director that the middle school teams do use that field after school, and they set up a planning meeting with the city to determine what days they'll be using it.
Okay, and I assume that that's something that's ongoing, that the plan would be to continue to do that.
I believe so. Melissa also spoke with Arbo on that as well.
Correct. We have a meeting with the city and then the athletic director, as well as the principal at the high school every December, and go through our plan ahead. So it takes into account the 7-8 activities such as the carnival or other activities that will be using the fields during joint use hours to make sure that we have top priority.
And then the other question I brought up at the time is that our lease provisions used to have a standard language in them that said that the lessee understands that the city may be using the field after 3 o'clock during non-school hours, but that the lessee would have priority for it. How did that get resolved? Did you talk with our lessees?
I did. I spoke to them earlier this week, and we've gotten that clarified up, and there was a MOU that went to the city in 2013. That's the 5/31/2013 to make sure that was put into language there. I will be meeting with the city next week to make sure we're all good for the summer over the summer school hours as well.
And then just the final point, I think is one that Josh brought up already, and the 5:30 is not really our desire. We would really like to see more use of our own fields. The 5:30 at the high school and the same thing at the other fields. But really, this is just a codification of an existing agreement and is not really getting us what we're seeking eventually. We're hoping to get more of our own time on our own fields.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good point, Dan. That speaks to the city's partnership with us on the scheduling tool and loading the data and the request. City's pretty good about giving us permits when we ask for it, but really taking a look after what we said, 12 to 18 month study to kind of pull all the data together and then have another conversation of maybe these hours need to be tweaked based on the findings. I mean, if it's just 2 months out of the year, it can be an exception, but if it's 11 months out of the year and is really a norm and not an exception, some of those times should probably be changed. So. Okay. Anything else? Do I have a motion to approve this supplemental agreement, the revised supplemental agreement coming back from the city, 2302?
Motion to approve action to approve supplemental agreement 2302.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so approved. Thank you very much.
Mr. Radaba,
Yes.
we only had one public comment online for this item and we had 5 for the previous item. They're all public and anyone can go onto our agenda website and review them.
Thank you. On a second. I am missing my. There we go. Okay, so we still have a lot to cover tonight. All right, let's move on to 12F, and this is our LCAP for 23-24. Karen.
Good evening, governing board members and cabinet. Thank you for having me this evening. So this evening I'm here to share the draft of the 2023-24 LCAP with some discussion and it's part of the public meeting and the first read for the LCAP. So my presentation, can we set that up? Great, thank you so much. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of the LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan. It's a 3-year plan, and we are currently we just finished the 2nd year of a 3-year plan. The 2023-24 plan that we're putting forth to you is our 3rd and final year on this 3-year plan. And next year we will be starting to create our new 3-year plan that will start the following year. Each year we track our progress through some metrics that we have and predetermined metrics. And we also do report on our finances related to the goals through our budget overview for parents. We also have at each school site, we have an LCAP and a school site LCAP/school site council committee, as well as a district LCAP parent advisory committee that meets regularly. And we discuss the LCAP, we review the LCAP, and we get feedback. So just a little bit of information. The district LCAP committee, parent advisory committee meets regularly. And the bulk of our work really is collecting educational partner feedback on our goals, our metrics, our services, our actions as well. And we pull all of this data together, all of this information, and we decide, we work together to decide if anything needs to be updated, tweaked, changed. And we start writing the draft for our new plan for the following year. We also, as I mentioned, today, this is our public meeting. We bring the draft LCAP plan and the budget overview to this meeting. And once we get into discussion, I will be bringing it finally on June 27th for adoption. And I will also be bringing the local indicators at that time. And this is just sort of a visual of the process for the year. So we begin in the fall. We start having our meetings. Most of the winter time, our LCAP committee members, district members, reach out to all of our educational partners have several meetings, discuss, share information, and we collect our feedback. In the spring, we continue to meet and we pull together all of the recommendations. We come up with a new executive summary with any changes that we've made, and we begin the writing process for the draft of our LCAP plan for the new year. I also work very closely with a representative from the Los Angeles County Office of Education who gives us feedback. We make tweaks and adjustments. I bring it back to our committee. And then, like I said, we bring it to the board for adoption after our public meeting. And then the final step is the Los Angeles County Office of Education will review it and approve the plan, and it gets posted on our website. So as I mentioned, the bulk of the work really is collecting educational partner feedback. We send out a survey. We attend all of the meetings for educational partners. We collect feedback. And some of the key things that came out of this year's sort of the overall and looking, we had a lot of feedback, but the overall, we saw that there was definitely a desire to expand the 7-8 wellness room and make it its own dedicated wellness center. So that will be happening and will be opened in the fall of 2023-24. So we're excited about that. And as well, we saw that we need to continue our communication on district initiatives, efforts and successes with all of our educational partners. So we're looking forward to the new communications coordinator who will be starting next year, and hopefully we'll get a lot of great information out to our families. So at this point, are there any questions, any discussion about the plan? It was shared with you, including the budget overview for parents.
How about I'll start with a thank you. I know this is a tremendously complicated process to create the LCAP. And at first, when the state first required us to start doing it, it felt like a tremendous amount of make work and a lot of paperwork and a lot of other things to be involved in it. But having observed it now a few times, I realize it's an excellent opportunity to get feedback from the community. By taking the process of saying, we think this is important to us as a district, and taking it out to all the various groups, teachers, students, various family groups, we get some incredibly good responses back, some information back. Like, as you mentioned, the request to expand the 7-8 wellness center. I mean, the big things, and also very little things. Like, we find out that, restroom toilet paper is not getting stocked enough. And it's really interesting because I think it's the one time that we kind of reach out to a whole broad spectrum of our community and say, tell us everything you want to about the school. And the feedback, actually, there's a process that you've implemented where everything comes back, channels back, and eventually gets routed to the right person. And so while it seems like a tremendously burdensome process, I think it's also extremely beneficial that we go through it. So thank you for all your work. I know it's an incredible amount of time.
The one thing over the past few years, I've only done this for a few years, is we're really getting student voices. They're comfortable sharing. They're sharing a lot of information with us. So that's been really, I know, a good change I've seen over the past few years.
But in simple terms, it's the state's process. They allocate the money to us and they want us to bottom up, tell them where we're spending our money. And so it's our way to link our priorities with our budget, back to some of the things Josh is saying. At some point, we've got to be able to decompose that amount against these services. And so I've seen that evolve over the last couple of years, where you kind of see where the money's going at a little more granular level. And then the puts and calls we have to make along the way in terms of making changes. And we're still coming out of the COVID and all the pieces that we had to, shift where we allocated stuff. And now we're getting back to more normal. And is normal mean the same buckets from prior COVID, or maybe things have evolved, right? So, but again, thank you for everybody. I'm a process guy, and I saw the Chevron chart, love the Chevron charts. So that's good. But I do encourage the community to take a look at the details when they can on this, because it's pretty illuminating.
Yeah, I think that the document itself is, but first off, it's so incredibly dense, and the work that you put into this is unbelievable. And I'm very appreciative of that. But also, if you dive in, you really do get a sense of our school and where we're at. And you can see, I'm especially happy now that we're seeing we're starting to see trends a little bit, as we're seeing multi-year. When it was 1 year, it was kind of hard to know. So I'll be interested again as we use this to evaluate things. I did have one question, and it's not it's not process, it's just really, from my understanding, which is chronic absenteeism. Can we define that? I don't know what the definition is exactly.
Yeah, I've got the def.
Yeah, there is a definition. It's a percentage of the total number of school days. Is it 10% of the total number of school days?
10%,
Ten
yeah.
percent.
Which
And when
works
you
out
think
to-
about 10% of 182 days, it's not
day.
that many apps.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2 days a month.
Yeah.
That's it. So somebody gets sick and has to stay home for 5 days. They're already chronically absent.
Yeah, and it is, I noticed in the sort of solutions for it, it's challenging because the solutions are, oh, if it's a longer stay, if there's a longer set of days, then we can find a solution to that. But I would bet that if we were to dig into that, we would find that it's 2 days here and 3 days here and 1 day here. And pretty soon, you know, you can get to 9 days in a semester and without too much problem.
And one of the things, just since we have the opportunity, one of the challenges that we found with, sort of at the bargaining table and looking at next year's budget is our average daily attendance has always been extremely high. I mean, it's anywhere from 97.5 to 98.5. And we've become really reliant on those numbers because those percentages determine the dollars that we'll actually receive as a part of the COLA that the state provides the district, the cost of living adjustment. And this year, because of, we encourage families, if your child is ill, stay home. We're still not beyond some of the COVID stressors that have led to mental health days, which we want our kids to be, healthy and happy. And sometimes you do need a mental health day, but we've got to balance all of that against the fact that we need students to be in school whenever possible. And we need to build back to that 97.5, 98%, simply because we're reliant on those budget numbers to, keep a healthy budget to provide all the goods and services that we need to provide to our families to maintain a world-class education. So, it's this push-pull. And I think we just need to really consistently message to parents that attendance is critical and that we need to boost those percentage numbers for ADA.
And I think the only other thing about chronic absenteeism that there are options for parents if a kid is going to be out for an extended period. And I think it's just good to remind parents that if they know their kids can be out for an extended period, they should contact the teachers and administrators so that they can not be considered absent. There are various ways to deal with it, but to just make plans ahead of time if they know they're going to be out for a while.
Okay, I don't think we have any online comments and we don't have any in-person comments, correct? The public comments. Well, any other, we're going to see you again, right?
Yes. at the end of the
Okay.
month.
So any other wrap-up comments for Karen?
Thank you. Excellent
All right.
work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It's a lot of work. It's very appreciated.
Okay. So now we move into some other components of our education front, which is courses and curriculum at the schools. And so Dr. Gold, well, I think Wendy, or Ani's going to set it up and Dr. Gold will come up. So we have some new courses. Our next 3 agenda items are around some 3 new exciting courses.
Thank you. So every January, February, our admin team and high school administration comes together and we decide what courses we're going to offer based on student needs and desires. This last year when we met, it looked like we were going to need a few more electives at the 7-8 level to make it more interesting for our students. So the next 3 items are 3 different courses that we would like to present to you and hopefully get approved tonight so that we can start our work towards implementation. I have invited Jarrett to join us for these 3 items so he can kind of tell you a little bit more about the class and then open it up for any questions you may have. Thanks, Jarrett.
Sure. First, thank you for having me. I will start with the overview of what 2 of the 3 classes are. So if you're familiar with 7-8, in 7th grade, we have a exploratory wheel. The kids rotate around 4 classes over 10 weeks, and they rotate from class to class to class. We've had some consistency over the last 3 or 4 years. But with Danielle Merpinsker getting the IRC position, she was one of the sewing teachers, which was a hit and the kids loved it. But with her going to the IRC, that class was dismantled. And then the interest in LCTV dropped immensely over the last couple of years. And the numbers dropped down at the high school and the kids weren't interested in the middle school. So the two new classes are proposing for the wheel, which are all 10-week classes, will be one which will be run by Miss Sachs, which is social and self-wellness. And that'll focus on specific things around kindness, support, topics like goal setting, health and welfare. It's kind of a course we talked about a lot. I used to teach in LA, and we called it life skills course, and it was a semester long, along with health, and that was taught in the high school level. But this will be along those same lines, focusing on mental and social health, with some focus on yoga and just things that will help communication, decision making, kindness, like I said, goal setting, with the other course being run by Mr. Belanzia, which is going to be a gardening course. I've worked with Barbara and Melissa about finding a space to do that. Daryl Belanzia is a person who at his previous school created gardens. He's very into gardening. And he actually created a whole farmer's market at his old school that was weekly with all of that food. And we're finding a way to incorporate what he knows and his knowledge with our students, with having a different focus for each quarter as the students rotate. So it'll be a throughway. It won't be the same thing every 10 weeks, but it'll rotate based on the season, based on the weather. And we're trying to, along with that, have some beautification to the campus, because the garden will be around where the varsity scoreboard is. Believe it or not, there's a lot of space there. And he's willing to put in the work with some students to do that. So those are the two courses for the wheel. So those are proposals for 10-week courses. We could talk about those before going to the year-long course if you have any questions.
I think it's ingenious. Well, first off, my first question. So this is simply a swap out, right? So there's no incremental cost, but you found the teachers to do swap out. The wheel's very beneficial. I'm surprised that the LCTV's kind of dipped, because but anyways, I think these are ingenious courses, especially as they wrap through health and wellness and things like that. That's really important, social, emotional. And then the gardening, we've had these in the student and the campus pride and how it all kind of interconnect. So it's an interesting, innovative way to tackle this and give some exposure to new subjects. So big supporter of both of these.
Very nice.
Can I ask what the numbers are in the wheel?
Sure. The wheel is the biggest elective for seventh graders. They hold up to 144 kids, which is almost a little less than half the class. It's usually right now it's about 125, 130. So it's about a third of the class. So most of the seventh graders, if they're not sure what they're doing, they go to the wheel. Like if they're band or orchestra kids, they go there. If they're language kids and want to do language in seventh grade, they go there. Other than that, the majority of kids do go to the wheel.
I was just gonna say, I think the gardening course is fantastic. When we are in COVID and doing remote learning, one of the 7-8 science teachers had a segment on gardening. And my daughter started a garden in our side yard, and it's still growing over our neighbor's fence, but still growing. And it really, at first I thought, why? But they actually spent a lot of time talking about the science of it, everything from photosynthesis to water and absorption. Like it really became a very science oriented course. So I think it's a great idea.
Daryl blew me away with the knowledge of what he knows about gardening, talking a different language when it comes to gardening. And he's very relatable to kids. The kids really like him. I think he's excited to dip his toe into 7-8 as well.
How will this impact his schedule? Will this be a 6/5 assignment for him?
It will not. So with the English 4 numbers or English 2, which Daryl teaches, they were able to absorb that one class. So it's not even a 6/5.
I have to say, I also thought the gardening looked great, but the curriculum for the social and self-wellness course, especially as we're talking about, we have the SAGE contract on our consent agenda, and we're talking about more time for counseling for our 7th and 8th graders. But this feels like potentially a really important course. And so I'd love maybe at the end of the year, if we could get a report back, because this feels like something that maybe is useful for everybody in that 7th and 8th grade time. And I know my daughter all did choir, so nobody's been in the wheel, so I haven't had that experience. But this, just when I looked at the content plan, I thought, oh wow, I could see this being a really effective course for everybody at sort of that perfect age. So.
And I think the perfect teacher is doing it. I think Carrie Sachs is right up her alley of her strength with building culture, building wellness, building community spirits. That is a strength of Carrie's, and I'm excited for her to do the class.
Jared, maybe we can collect student feedback towards the end and share that with the board
That would
to
be
see
great.
how much they liked it, and it can be anonymous so that they can freely communicate what they think, and then we can decide. Thank you. Since we're talking about both items in one item, because we are going to need your vote of approval on each one, so we can proceed. But since we've kind of talked about both,
I was going to make the same recommendations. Why don't we knock these two out? It sounds like we have some enthusiasm for this. For these two, let's want to knock them off. Do we have a
Just one
motion
last
to-
quick question. Do you still get confusion by people who don't understand what you mean by wheel? Have you ever thought of like changing the terminology so people know that it's like elective that has 3 different components to it or something?
Well, I think people that don't have kids in 6th or 7th grade don't understand it. When I talk to parent groups, I'll go to all PTAs and the incoming 7th grade parent night where we have 450 people there. It is re-emphasized over and over. I think all the kids who are taking the class understand what it is. We'd be open to better ideas.
Oh, no, I mean,
It's been called that, I think, before Wendy
Yeah.
was principal.
Yeah, I think the kids taking it know, and I think by the time they sign up for it and take it, they know. I think what gets confusing is when they're first going to 7-8 and they're looking at the course choices and they don't quite get how the wheel thing works. And I don't know, I don't think it's really so much a term as just, I encourage you to keep explaining it to the 6th graders because the kids will get it.
Yeah, I think that the kids get, we've never really had an issue after day 1 or day 2 where they say, why am I in cooking and not in music? And we tell them, well, every 10 weeks, we have a graphic we show them as well, showing the rotation of what you go to next. So I think the kids understand it. And if not, they understand it by day 1 or 2.
Jared, do we have the graphic on the website?
We can.
That'd be good.
Can it be turning along the way? Okay, well then, do I have a motion to approve these two as a bundle?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
perfect.
Okay, 2 out of the way. Good.
All right,
That's
thank you.
exciting. And we're ready to move on. You're also handling the sports medicine year-long course?
Yes.
Yeah, so we created a medical biology class a couple years ago. Miss Warner was doing it. It captures a certain group of kids who are interested in going into that field of biology, medicine. Miss Warner has done it at a 6/5. It's a passion of hers. She's a little burnt out. And so we thought about to reinvigorate the class. And one of the thoughts were to help grow the high school sports medicine class that we could offer a 7A sports med class. And we were trying to figure out good people and who could do that. And it was a no-brainer with Emily Hunter, who's our trainer. She's awesome. She works at CHLA. I know Danielle and Deborah working with her to make sure that everything is copacetic with her teaching that class, which I think everyone's on board with. She has the expertise. She has a relationship with kids. We have 32 kids already signed up for the class. So that's kind of the avenue we want to go in place of medical biology. And I think anytime kids see sports in front of something, I think it encourages them. I know it's something probably would encourage me as a 7th or 8th grader to take a class to learn more about how the body works, especially when it relates to athletics or sports. So that's the other course we're proposing. And to be clear, that is a year-long course. That is not part of the wheel. That is a standalone class that is currently full for next year.
How many have already signed up?
I think we have 32.
Can I ask a question about the instructor?
Yeah.
Is she a part-time instructor with LCUSD or?
No, she's the trainer for us. And then I believe she works in the mornings at CHLA as an athletic trainer. And through CTE credentialing, I believe she will be credentialed within a year to be able to teach that CTE course.
So this next year, she would be sort of a preliminary of.
She's on a permit
emergency-
for this coming year. Yeah.
Got it.
And I know Deborah and Danielle have already worked with her, what she has to do by the end of the year to ensure that's all set for the 24-25 school year.
But the financial impact, so you had the medical biology, that teacher is burned out, but she's still at the full FTE level, right?
So-
So to do this and add her as the sports trainer to this, what's the financial impact?
I can make you an argument it's a savings because Miss Warner was doing a 6/5.
Mhm.
Miss Warner, who is a 20-something year teacher, is no longer doing the 6/5, and that 0.2 will now just go to Emily Hunter, who's a first-year teacher.
Okay. Makes sense to me. I think we need to be in a position to try to move on this tonight for you, but did we have any online comments? No? Okay, I didn't see it.
did have a question. I used to teach CPR. Is it possible to have these kids included in CPR training?
That is something she wants to do. She has a certification to be able to do it. And I told her I'd be able to provide the funding for it.
And then the other thing is, I know she frequently takes the high school kids, and when she's on duty as the trainer for our athletic events, she has some of the high school kids help out. I think that's great. And if I don't know if that's possible for 7-8, but if so, I'd encourage that.
I think it is possible. And I think that's one of her ideas.
Excellent.
Okay, well then, do we have an appetite to move to motion?
I move to approve.
Thank
I'll
you,
second
Caroline.
that.
Thank you, Dan. All right, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Excellent. Thank you.
3 for
so much.
3.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dr. Gold. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now we are making some progress. All right, so Jay, Melissa, report of estimated revenue expenditures for 2022-23 and proposed budget for 23-24. Oh, and Gretchen's joining us too. That's why you've been sitting back here all night. Okay.
Got the tag team. All right. We have a PowerPoint to bring up. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I realize it's getting late, so hopefully you'll be still intrigued by the numbers. This is our first read. We will be presenting the 23-24 budget and then the 22-23 estimated actuals. We will be back for a second read at your next board meeting. And at that time, hopefully everything looks great and you'll be able to approve it. And that goes hand in hand with the LCAP. You can click and then I'll click for you. Okay, so I just kind of touched on the objectives tonight are to go over the estimated actuals and the proposed budget, and that will also be the multi-year proposal, the multi-year plan, multi-year projections. Okay. First, we'll touch on the estimated actuals. This is a look at comparing second interim to our estimated actuals. The revenue, we see a slight decline of 364,000. Expenditures are also going up by about 313,000, with the difference of the ending fund balance of prior to transfers of about 51,000. We will go into more detail on the next slides as far as the revenue expenditures, but that's the big picture comparing second interim to the estimated actuals. As far as revenue, the LCFF, that's a combination of, as Wendy kind of alluded to, the ADA at our P2 numbers, the kids coming to school, that's what our revenue is based off of. So we now have our P2 numbers. They've been incorporated into our estimated actuals. We also had an accrual that we cleaned up with LCFF, and that attributed to the balance of that difference. In the federal bucket, you'll notice how we're receiving more money. That's that originally we were thought the ELO grant and the ESSER funds were going to come through the state, but it turned out that they came through the federal side. So that money was taken out of the other state bucket and it was moved into the federal, hence an increase of that 305,000. The other state bucket, as Governor Newsom in his May revise, due to the less revenue coming in, we're going to be receiving reductions in the arts and music grant of about 51% and the learning recovery grant of about 32%. So we've pulled those monies out of the budget, and that is where that being reflected by the other state. Melissa's going to go more into detail on her section.
Sorry, just
problem.
is that, so that's the clawback of that money and the shift from the state to the federal, that's all in that.
That's all in
Okay.
that. So the other state is actually quite a bit higher, but because we pulled, we were able to balance it. So it's not, so when I say 51 and 31, I think, wait, that's a lot more money, is because it was balanced out. Okay. And then the other local, we're receiving more interest than we originally anticipated with the rates as they are. And also we have the E-rate coming in that we were not aware of it second and round, thanks to Jamie. Okay. As far as expenditures, you'll see we've been really close on the certificate and classified salaries. We're really working hard to keep those in line. Benefits, we are seeing a little bit of a savings. Part of that was the certificate retirees, and we also tightened up the certificated benefits. So hopefully you'll see that a lot closer. Materials and supplies, you'll see that we're spending about another 709,000 than we anticipated. These are a lot of the textbooks that we purchased. We're buying textbooks for next year, but we're going to be getting them during before the June 30th deadline. So they are hitting this year's books. The other thing is the CTE grant at second interim. We didn't have any information on that. So those expenditures have been added, as well as the revenue was added. And service, and also the College and Career Center has now been completed. So all of those expenses have been added in with our estimated actuals. Services, you'll see some savings there. Most of that is on the special ed side. So the contracted services, both in transportation and just general services, we're not spending as much as we thought we were going to. So we're able to pull back on some of those purchase orders. The LCE Wellness Center and also the CalShape expenditures, we had those budgeted for second interim, but those expenditures are not going to hit us till next year. So they've been pulled out of this year. They have been moved to next year. Okay, and then the capital outlay, that additional expense is the CTE grant expenditure being added in. Okay. And then this is the overall look. So we basically bottom line, again, that surplus of or deficit of about 51,000 that we're spending less of. So the ending fund balance. And we are within the 3.5% reserve that we need to be.
Can you explain the beginning balance? Why is the beginning the estimated
Yes,
versus-
yes. Typically, the beginning balance should be the same for both second interim and estimated actuals. In working with our auditors, in fact, Melissa, I know you're kind of helping me with this, but it's basically the net change, the fair market value. Typically, this is very immaterial because the interest rates aren't in the past where they have been, but because this year they were so high, it affected our fair market value. So when the auditors came in, they helped us with the adjustments. We weren't able to make the adjustments at second interim. We since have completed those. And so it increased our ending fund balance by about 400,000. Did that kind of explain? Do you understand the fair market values? Okay. And so our goal now is now that we've kind of gone through the process, that before we close our books this year, we hope to have those calculations. They don't come out until like that very last week that we're closing our books. So we hope to include those, and we will not see a change next year in the beginning balance. Okay, Melissa will take over from here.
And then I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the proposed budget for 23-24 and then the out years. So first, I want to talk about the overall big picture at the state level. So the governor in his budget, he continues to hold back on using his rainy day funds. So thus the triggering of the 10% reserve cap is still in place. He also has projected $106.8 billion in minimum guarantee to remain constant in the governor's budget. This is what he had projected at January as well. And so he stayed consistent with that. For the local control funding formula, also known as LCFF, he projects a 8.22% cost of living adjustment, also known as COLA. And this is what we've included in our first read projections, as well as $2.7 billion on one-time Prop 98 increase on the base funding. We also use a 3-year rolling average to assist with that ADA decline. And that's not just specific to our district. All districts across California, not all, most districts across California are seeing a decrease in attendance. Again, looking at the May revision, the pension increase, there is no relief in sight for PERS. We are increasing the rates year over year for that based on the PERS board. CalSTRS remains high. We do not see an increase. It's at 19.1% in the next 3 years, but that again gets voted on. And so that could change, but in the projections, we're keeping it at what is assumed as of right now. And then also in the governor's budget, he has school nutrition as a top priority still, where universal meals are funded, free meals, breakfast and lunch for all students every day. And we've met on that before and discussed that when Jamar and the other cafeteria workers have discussed that. We serve breakfast and lunch for all students. And so he's proposing an additional $191 million ongoing for state meal reimbursement. And then also in his budget are some reductions. As Gretchen mentioned, the Prop 28, there's a $8 million decrease from the January estimate. That is what the the voters approved, to have Prop 28 arts and music funding, but there is a decrease in that estimate. We still haven't gotten any actual ideas of what we can spend it on and what we can use. We know it's supposed to be spent at a site-wide level, and then the district kind of oversees that, but we still haven't gotten actual plans from the state as how we're allowed to use it. So we do have that reduction there. And then the arts, music, and instructional block grant, we had previously approved that here at a board meeting, and there is a large decrease, as Gretchen mentioned, the 51% of our grant. So we've taken that into account as well. We've been working with some of our other educational partners that we've already agreed to use some of the funding on, and we will work with them to try and continue to do as much as we can, but still keep in mind the district needs and that there is a cut to that program, the one-time funds. And then he also has a decrease or reduction in the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. And that's a decrease of about 32% of the funding. And that's statewide 5.4 billion. Again, that's not at LCUSD level, that is at statewide level. And then going on to the LCUSD specific, we take a look at our enrollment. So we're projecting enrollment for next year at 3940. We're hopeful that Wendy can get us those numbers. She laughs. We're currently at 3,800 rolling over, and then she has, we're hoping that we can get about 140 permit applications in there. So hoping those stay strong. And then we project out 4,000 in the out years. So for 24, 25, and then 25, 26, we're projecting 4,000 in enrollment. As Wendy mentioned earlier, we are seeing a decrease in ADA. So we're keeping it conservative in the out years at the 96.79%. And if that does change next year, if we do see an increase, we can obviously adjust that for the out years. The state would not hold us liable if we underestimate it in our budget. We would see what was based on our actuals. So that's nice there. Our COLA, as mentioned, is 8.22% from the state. And then the out years are there as well. It's right about 4%. What I want to note here is that LCUSD's actual net realized COLA that we will receive is about 5.87%. So although you'll hear that the statewide COLA is 8.22%, LCUSD is only receiving about 5.87%. And that's about $2.2 million for the district, which is a nice increase there. However, we have added costs as well. And so we've taken into account the decrease in ADA, and that's why we don't see the dollar for dollar increase.
Can I ask you a question? And I know the COLAs and the out years is just made up, but the net COLA is like a 2.3 decrease, 2.3% decrease, but in the out years, there isn't a decrease. And in some cases, actually, it's larger than that projected COLA. Well, why not factor in the decrease in the out years?
It does take into account, but it is based on a 3-year rolling average. So that's why, as now this year and last year were lower, we're projecting the out years to be at that 96.7%. So that's why you're seeing a little bit higher, because the state as of right now doesn't ding us for having lower ADA 1 year. You can use the 3-year rolling or the higher of last year or this year.
So sorry. So in like 24, 25, you're projecting that the actual net realized COLA is 3.83, but the COLA included in the future years for 25, 26 is 3.29. So it's actually the projected COLA is higher than the COLA that's.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Correct.
So
it's based on the ADA. So we're funded on prior year or current year. And so since we're seeing an increase, as we're mentioning that the enrollment's going up, that we're hoping that it goes up, that's why it's higher there.
sorry, but I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on this because I know it's just not real money. The 3.29% is 100% funded COLA, right? In 25, 26. So how would we be above that?
Because it's based on the enrollment. So if they take the prior year, I'm sorry, the ADA. So since it's based on prior year, it's based on there. So I see what you're saying, that it's not technically COLA, because that would be the same, but because we would be funded, our funded ADA is higher. It factors in a calculator from FCMAT, but it's higher. Does that? And I know you say they're fake numbers, but they're assumptions based on what we know today. So the governor has to approve the budget by June 15th, and then we'll go forward from there and make changes along the way. And then we've also taken into account that COVID funds are expiring, so there's no more one-time dollars related to COVID. And then in our budget assumptions for LCUSD, we've taken into account step and column increases for certificated. It's about 432,000, which is 1.75%. And if you look at their salary schedule, their average is about 1.71%. And so historically, we've always shown the 1.75%, and that's across all ranges and steps and columns. So there's generally about 3.5% between each step for the ranges. But if you take into account those that kind of max out and don't have a step year after year, it averages to the 1.71%. And for classified as well, we take into account their step change is about 1.25%. We want to notate that we haven't taken into account any salary compensation changes for next year, but I am happy to let you guys know, as you are already aware, that we have settled with all three union groups. That should be coming back to the board as a AB 1200 next meeting on June 27th. We've settled for 4.75% ongoing and nothing off schedule. So when we bring the budget next time, we won't see that in there, but we will specifically call out what the amount is, so you know what you're approving, even though it doesn't have it in there. We'll build it in for the first interim. And then we have our budgeted pension changes. As mentioned, the certificated does not have a change, but then classified is going up a little bit more than 1%. And that cost to the district is $142,000. And then looking at the multi-year projection, again, this is based on the assumptions that we know. We'll know a little bit more every day as we get more information. It's past Senate and legislature, and it's just kind of going through up in the ranks. So looking at that, you can see the change in revenue year over year. That's based on the COLA changes, is also changes for any state, local, or federal funding. The expenditures change year over year based on what we had discussed earlier, step and column, health and welfare, the consumer price index, so CPI for all of the materials and supplies and other services that we see. We know our employees are seeing it, and everyone else in the community, the prices increase, but the district is also seeing the prices as well. So as you look for the difference year over year, if you look out to 25, 26, we are net positive. I want to just point out, when we keep in mind the settlement there, so we will adjust that at first interim, but then we will mention it as well when we hopefully adopt this on 6/27. And then the ending fund balance, it's the board approval rate of the 3.5%. So I just wanted to point out that we are meeting the 3.5% reserve. The state has a reserve of 3%, but the board has historically always requested a 3.5%. So we are meeting that in all of our 3 out years as well. And then as our next steps, as we're closing out, we're going to continue to monitor the May revision as it goes through the rest of the legislature. It should be passed on June 15th. We will be presenting a second read on June 27th with the summarized presentation. There shouldn't be any major changes. Jackie and Gretchen are going through individual line items and changing any additions that we see based on actual projections as of Friday's numbers, as of this morning's numbers. So looking if anything else is posted and really treeing up if there's been any additional items that came up. And then we will be working on the unaudited actuals during the summer, and we will be back in September to accept those. Are there any questions?
A kind of big question about SB 98. That's the Portantino's legislation that would change the definition of ADA to allow districts to consider ADA to be enrollment. And I believe it passed the Senate. If that goes through, how do you anticipate that? Would that help or hurt our district?
So it really depends on how they change the language. I feel the way it reads right now, it could hurt us because we are a lower UPP district, our unduplicated pupil percentage. And so we do have a lot higher rate of attendance and then the lower rate of UPP. It'll just depend on how they change it along the way. And it takes into account that we are a smaller district, so we won't see as big of a effect as well.
Do we know how much it would hurt us?
We don't know yet, or I don't know yet.
I didn't realize that nuance. Do we need to get something to, well, if it's already passed the Senate, like Anthony's already done, right? He's already.
Well, I know CSBA has been opposed to it unless amended. So I assume that Senator Portantino realizes that there's requests to have it amended, but it might be helpful to,
We can send him a note if you want to package up something for us. We can provide it to him in terms of some knowledge, because I'm not sure he would be aware of that nuance that in actuality, we potentially get hurt in the process. So we were advocating for that change, but yet didn't realize possibly depending on language that it might actually take us backwards.
And they might build something in that you won't lose. And so that's what they've done before is you won't, on other language changes that they've made, that the districts that would benefit will get it, but they're not gonna ding the other ones essentially.
But then you won't lose based off our
There is a whole.
3-year rolling calculation from attendance, and that's, we want to really get back up to enrollment, right? So, or 100%. I had one question, and I'm sorry if you covered it earlier. In your assumptions related to parcel tax and our inflation factors, is that baked in at the max right now?
Yes, so we've baked in the 3% for parcel tax, and that those notices have gone out already too.
And you've done that for multi-year as well for now?
Correct.
So-
We've
yeah.
baked in that as well as the lease increase for other lessees that we have as well.
and I think though that on our parcel tax, the excess above 3% does not roll over. So that even though the cost of living increase is significantly above 3% this year, the maximum that the parcel tax can go up is 3%. And that extra 5% or so is not banked to the next year. So in future years, we're limited to whatever the actual cost of living is.
Correct. So say COLA in 2 years out goes down to 2%, that would be the max that we're allowed to raise parcel tax.
We also have a 3% multi-year each year for like utility increases.
Well, the reality in all this right now, it's good news that we've settled, right? I think that'll be important. Look into the future when you kind of make all the numbers settle down based on what we've negotiated. So I think it's going to be another hard look for the board here, just to be aware and reconcile what's going on, because it's glad we're settled, but there's some financial things we got to be close attention to. So.
I think also there's a lot of people now speculating that we're headed towards a financial winter and that it could be a challenging few years coming up, which is probably a good reminder of what this board and this district's always done, has been very fiscally conservative and make sure that any funds we receive for one-time only expenses are only used for one-time only expenses. And a great example of that is the arts and music grant. I remember when we were talking about it, a lot of districts initially decided to spend that arts and music grant on ongoing programs. And fortunately we did not, so that, because if we had ongoing programs, we'd have to be cutting back now. It's one thing to, not make the purchases, but it's much different than having to actually cut back a program. So I applaud you and Wendy and all of the cabinet of staying on top of that and keeping us fiscally conservative.
What are the assumptions for the foundation donation? Where do we sit with the assumption now?
So next year, I believe it's 2.1.
That's what our assumption is 2.1.
Correct. I'm looking at
And-
just to make sure I.
And they're trending lower than that, so it might be sometimes when the annual fund comes in lower, they get a donation from the endowment. And so I'm sure they'll, as our partners, try to get us in at the 2.1.
0.1 each of the years out.
Okay. Have you met with the incoming president of the foundation yet? Wendy,
I'm sorry.
have you met with the incoming president?
No, we haven't. We were at the last annual meeting and we signed off with Tracy and am I having Yvonne? And they were wonderful, and we'll get a meeting on the books with the incoming president.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? This is never enough to approve anything. This is FYI only, I think, but next time around we'll have to be ready to go on that. Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, before we move on, should we make the motion to continue beyond 10:30 if necessary? While I expect our open session will be done by 10:30, I know we have to go back to closed
Yeah.
session. So I think procedurally we
The
actually
Grim
have to
Reaper,
do
thank
that.
you, Dan.
I know.
Okay, yeah, do we have that motion?
I'd so move.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor to extend it as needed? Okay. Till, not as needed until midnight?
As up to our
Okay.
rules allow us to extend up to midnight.
Okay, very good. Sounds like we've approved it across the board. Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving into, and it might be Melissa again, right? So let's move to item K, accept bid for bid number LC 22/2315 demolition and grading for new modular building,
Okay.
PCY.
So the district issued an invitation for formal bids in accordance with public contract code. Advertisement for the bids was published in the Outlook and the Glendale News Press. Staff received 8 bids and in response, and they're listed in our board packet. So the lowest responsive bidder was Chalmers at $775,000. And so tonight it's recommended that the governing board accept the bid for demolition and grading for the new modular building increment 1 at PCY and authorize staff to execute a contract with Chalmers for the project. I just want to mention a couple things. I talked to Harold earlier because I knew this was the last item. So I said, you can go home, just give me an update just to make sure. So he will be at our 627 meeting, but Chalmers is also, we've done work with them before. And then, so we know their work. And then they used to, their main principal from Chalmers came from the AMB group, who's done work for our, for the career center. We'll be doing the locker room. And so right now we're starting to, look and start this work mid-July to assess the interim housing before we demolish the buildings.
So I know it's listed in our first read. Would it be a benefit for us to go for approval tonight?
Yes, please.
A question, what else has Chalmers been doing for us? Do you know?
So they were involved in the career center and then they got awarded the locker room that will be done over the summer, but we have approved that, but the lockers were on a long wait list, so that hasn't started. And then they've been doing other small projects around the district.
They did the wellness center first too.
Thank you.
I don't see any online comments or in-person comments. Board, anybody, any feedback for?
No.
So moved.
Say, okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good to go. Thank you, Melissa. But you're not done yet.
Yep.
Because we now have consent, but we pulled out an item from consent, which is tied to what you and I discussed. So let's go ahead, pull in 12, now it's 12L, gifts to the district.
Okay, tonight we just wanted to call out this and make special note of all the additional donations that come in to the district. Specifically, we do have people that are on a transfer or apply for a waiver to be in our district. And so they still are make the donation for the parcel tax. So that's awesome to see that they're still making their donation there and they make their contributions, even though they're not living in district boundaries. And then specifically what I wanted to call out is that I worked with John Peterson and a bunch of other groups to raise about $35,000 to date to refinish the North Gym floor completely. We will be sanding it down. It will be going offline July 17th for 3 to 4 weeks. We've worked with the user groups. We have new logos that will be going on the floor. So the district will be paying the additional amount, but we were very excited to see that we were able to make this happen this summer in such a short timeline, and that the PTA, Spartan All-Stars, the LC Sports Association, as well as the boosters all donated so far.
And again, you mentioned it, but special thanks to John Peterson, led the charge, herding the cats to get that done. And so I'm really pleased how fast. Jim was a big part of it too, right? Trying to mobilize and think through scenarios to pull it off, and Barbara and your crew and et cetera. So I think there's dead spots that we're fixing too. And luckily that floor we put in years ago was amazing quality, that we have the ability to sand that thing down and still have a good shelf life ready for that thing for the next few years. Yeah.
And since we pulled it off, I think also the PCY PTA donation of the grand piano is a donation from the Henriot family to the PTA. So that was a very generous donation.
That's great.
Correct. And we will be sending a letter to the family as well.
Very good.
And I think on the parcel tax, we see this frequently on the gifts that people who are permit families donate to the parcel tax, even though they're not required to pay the parcel tax. It's very encouraging that they make the donation in that amount, even though the district has never asked for it or requested it, but a lot of families know about it, and it's a really kind thing of them to do.
Yeah, we do send a letter twice a year, and we just remind our permit families that the gift that the sort of foundation asks for, and then the gift that, or the by living in the district, what people pay on the parcel tax. So it's a very soft ask, but when people come through, we really appreciate it.
Great. Okay, but we need to accept that technically, right? The gift, because was an action item on consent. So we have a motion to approve the gifts.
I'll make a motion to approve the gifts to the
Second.
district.
I saw a mouth move. I'll take Octavia's second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. That's a real blessing for us and everybody else. Okay, so the rest of the consent,
I'll make a motion to.
make a motion. Thank you,
consent.
Josh.
Second.
Caroline, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's great. So that concludes the agenda, but let's move on to our next section. Communications. And like we'd like to go around, we'll do a little round robin. Octavia. Good. Josh?
I just want to say this is the first year that I've had the chance to attend all the promotion ceremonies and the graduations, and it was a thrill, and it was great to see the difference between each of the promotions at the elementary schools, and it really embodied the schools themselves, and so I was really thankful to be invited to those and happy to attend.
They were amazing. I teared up. I was emotional around some of these. It's just seeing the growth and the bonding with the teachers and the kids and all the way around. So thank you, Josh. That's great. That'll be my comment. Dan?
I was also going to say the same thing. I think that by being at all of the sixth grade promotions and the eighth grade promotion and the high school graduation kind of brings it all back to seeing the kids succeed and moving on. And it's really truly great to see. So congratulations to all the kids.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's why we're all here, right? All of us. Anyways, okay. Caroline. Thank you. Jamie?
Really quickly, just a shout out to everyone in the district that's helping launch all of the summer schools that are getting ready to come in the next few weeks. So it's, even though we're happy to celebrate that school is ended, we're 4 days away from launching some really good experiences for a lot of students. So thanks to everybody behind the scenes working on that.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. I'll come back when Anais.
Just to reiterate, I'm looking forward to opening Summer Success Academy on Monday and seeing how many of our students who have enrolled are going to show up. Also, YMCA is excited to work with us, providing both enrichment and childcare after. So I'm hoping for some good, strong enrollment and some excellent services for our students.
Melissa?
And then a quick update on PCR. We've already started demoing the asphalt on the baseball or the play field there, and they're pulling up the grass tomorrow. So they're in full swing there. We have Monet working on the modernization as well as down on the field. So there's a lot of work happening at PCR, and PCY is getting going as well.
Yeah. We'll pass our thanks along to Harold and his team as well. So,
Yeah.
Deborah.
Just a real quick shout out to the food services department. They did a great job at the end of the year breakfast for all of our staff members, both certificated and classified, and it was just a pleasure. So thank you to Melissa and Gretchen and all the food service staff.
Nairi?
Our next regular meeting will be on June 27th. Thank you.
Thanks. Very good. Okay, last but not least, Wendy?
Just a couple of shout outs. We have 2 last people standing in our audience. So thank you to Sugi for just excellent leadership in the DEIOC, and to Jennifer Lindholm for providing us that just massive expertise that's allowed, I think, the committee to gel and build trust, because we can really rely on those skills and that academic perspective. So it's been really powerful. Also, this, yesterday was the breakfast, and everybody cheers because it's the beginning of summer, and we dove into this meeting and it's not going to let up for a while. So thank you to the board for all the commitments that you go to and attend, and being at the breakfast, being at all the completion ceremonies, the promotion, the graduation, the baccalaureate. So, and on and on and on. I know you enjoy it and love it, and it's a culminating event. But it's just commitment, and I'm grateful. And to my cabinet, there's so much happening, gearing up for summer school, gearing up for demolition and interim housing villages being built, and taking in all, notifications of parent rights, getting all of that built out. Nairi has done Herculean work, from breakfast to all of the events and all of the things she takes care of. It's just been huge. So to the team that remains in this room, I'm very grateful.
Fantastic. Well, board and Wendy, we're not done. So we're going to adjourn this meeting. But we are going to go back into close. I think cabinet is excused. And of course, the audience. Go home and get some sleep.